One night, a girl named Hikari was standing in front of her school while humming a tune. At that moment, Tatsuo, a math teacher at the school, happened to walk by and asked what she was doing there. Hikari was startled and looked completely panicked. The next day, the principal announced that a new teacher would be joining the staff that day. However, the new teacher still had not arrived, and the principal was surprised that someone could be late on their very first day of work. One of Tatsuo's colleagues asked if it was true that Tatsuo once researched demi-humans or agene. Tatsuo admitted that he had planned to make demi-humans the topic of his doctoral thesis, but since working with them involved many risks, ordinary teachers like him were not given permission to do so. In fact, he had never met a demi-human before. His colleague wondered why Tatsuo wanted to study them given how rare they were. Tatsuo explained that he had always wanted to interview one. Suddenly, the new teacher arrived and apologized for being late. The principal asked her to introduce herself. She explained that the train she took had been delayed due to an inspection, and it was extremely crowded. The principal understood and again asked her to introduce herself properly. Tatsuo found it odd since crowded trains were nothing unusual. His colleague, however, was not surprised because he already knew that the new teacher was a demi-human. The new teacher introduced herself as Sekie, a math teacher, and revealed that she was a succubus. Tatsuo was taken aback, realizing that he had just met a demi-human for the first time. In this world, there were people with extraordinary traits known as demi-humans. Some of the known types included succubi, vampires, and dullahans. They had long been part of folklore and legends. In the past, they were often mistreated, but discrimination against demi-humans had become rare in modern times. There were even organizations that helped those still struggling to live normal lives. For many, being a demi-human was simply seen as another part of one's identity. That day, students and teachers at Shibaseki High School were preparing for the opening ceremony of the new school year. Tatsuo approached Sakia to introduce himself, but she was clearly startled and nervous. When Tatsuo reached out his hand to greet her, Sakia panicked and accidentally dropped a ladder nearby. She quickly explained that, as a succubus, she dressed modestly and avoided physical contact with others to prevent any unintended reactions from her ability. Realizing his mistake, Tatsuo apologized for approaching her without understanding her situation. Sakia admitted that she had noticed Tatsuo watching her from afar earlier and assumed that he had only come to her out of curiosity. Feeling awkward, she excused herself and left. Tatsuo felt bad afterward, believing that she had simply misunderstood his intentions. A few days later, Tatsuo happened to run into Sakie near the school's sink area. He tried to apologize again for the previous incident, but Sakie assured him that it was fine and that he did not need to worry about it anymore. Moments later, Hikari appeared, calling out for a teacher. She was surprised to see Tatsuo standing there. Tatsuo immediately recognized her as the girl he had seen outside the school that night. It turned out that Hikari was a new student at Shibaseki High. Curious, Tatsuo asked why she had been at the school that late at night, even though the opening ceremony had not yet taken place. Hikari cheerfully explained that she had been trying on her new uniform at home and had gotten so excited about starting school that she wanted to visit right away. Tatsuo found her reasoning amusing but could not understand why she had run away when he tried to talk to her that night. According to Hikari, anyone would run if a strange older man suddenly talked to them in the dark because that was what she had been taught at school. She even said that Tatsuo should praise her for making the right decision and reacting quickly in that kind of situation. And Hikari suddenly remembered that one of her classmates was not feeling well, so she asked Tatsuo to help her take that student to the student infirmary. Tatsuo agreed and followed her. On the way, Hikari introduced herself as a student from Class 1B. When they arrived at the classroom, Tatsuo was surprised to see that Hikari's friend had no head. Hikari explained that her friend was a dullahan, a type of demi-human whose head was separated from their body. Hikari had already taken her friend's head to the infirmary earlier, but she had struggled to carry the body because it was too heavy. Tatsuo was amazed to realize that there were now 2 demi-humans at the school. He curiously asked if it was safe to touch the small blue flame that flickered at the dullahan's neck. Not long after, another student, a snow girl, was carried past them toward the infirmary because she was feeling dizzy. Tatsuo could hardly believe that demi-humans were appearing at the school one after another. While helping Hikari's friend, he asked why Hikari seemed so calm and not at all surprised to see other demi-humans. Hikari smiled and admitted that although demi-humans were rare, she was not surprised at all, because she herself was one too, a vampire. When Tatsuo arrived at the student infirmary, he was left speechless, still trying to process what had just happened. Hikari walked up to him and explained that the snow girl had simply overheated during PE class while the dullahan had just caught a cold. Tatsuo couldn't believe how easily he had come across demi-humans, and he was still in shock about the whole situation. Hikari then asked whether Tatsuo disliked demi-humans. Tatsuo quickly denied it. In fact, he admitted that he liked them. He had always wanted to meet one, but had never succeeded before, so he was genuinely happy to finally encounter them. Hearing that made Hikari smile. She hadn't expected him to feel that way, and her face turned slightly red as she realized how much it meant to him. Hikari then told him that the term ajin was old-fashioned and not really used anymore. It sounded too serious, she said, so schoolgirls nowadays preferred to call them demis. The next day, Tatsuo saw Hikari trying to borrow a book from her younger sister. When Tatsuo approached, Hikari quickly introduced her. Her name was Himari from Class 1C, and the two of them were twins. Himari finally agreed to lend the book but reminded Hikari not to scribble on it. Tatsuo commented that Himari seemed more responsible and that she apparently wasn't a demi like Hikari. A bit shyly, Tatsuo asked Hikari if she could tell him more about vampires. To his surprise, she agreed and promised to come to the biology room later. Tatsuo was thrilled to hear that. Hikari's friend, the Dullahan named Kyoko, was chatting with some classmates. They were curious about how she got to school. Did she take the bus? They wondered. But Kyoko explained that she usually walked because the buses were too crowded in the mornings, which made it dangerous for her since she always had to carry her head in her hands. Hearing that made her friends a little uneasy, so they quickly changed the topic to something lighter, like watching cute cat videos online. In most cases, being a demi wasn't something inherited. It happened due to a genetic mutation. That meant even twins could be different, with only one of them being a demi. Tatsuo still didn't really understand how demis lived their daily lives, how they thought, or how they interacted with others. There were so many questions running through his mind. That day, Hikari came to the biology room. She loved how cool, dark, and comfortable the place was. Tatsuo realized that vampires were sensitive to heat. Hikari said that the sunlight in her classroom was too bright and that she didn't want to bother her classmates by asking to block it, so she preferred to spend time in the biology room instead. Hikari reminded Tatsuo that he wanted to interview her, encouraging him to get started. Tatsuo handed her a book about vampire legends and asked what she thought of it. As Hikari flipped through the pages, she pointed out a few things that didn't really fit her experience. For example, she actually liked garlic and wasn't affected by crosses. Showing one of the pages, she joked that maybe she would die if someone pierced her heart, but that was probably true for anyone. Tetsuo then asked if vampires really needed to drink blood to survive. Hikari said she didn't think that was the case. She explained that vampires sometimes suffered from a condition similar to anemia, which was why they avoided sunlight. As long as they managed their diet well, they were perfectly fine. In fact, Hikari enjoyed eating liver with onions and drinking tomato juice since its flavor reminded her of blood. Hearing that, Tatsuo realized that vampires did indeed have a natural urge to drink blood. Hikari admitted that was true, but she also mentioned that the government provided blood packs to vampires, 1 pack per month, as part of a support program. Tetsuo remembered hearing about a vampire who lived without any government-supplied blood and asked Hikari what she thought about that. She said that such a vampire must be really impressive. When Tatsuo started to wrap up the interview, Hikari begged him to keep going so she could stay in the biology room a bit longer. Then she suddenly asked what he thought about vegetarians. Tatsuo replied that he thought vegetarians were admirable. Hikari smiled and said that it was kind of the same as vampires who chose not to rely on the government's blood supply. Curious, Tatsuo asked if she had ever wanted to drink blood directly from a person, since there were rumors that anyone bitten by a vampire would either turn into one or become their servant. Hikari admitted that she had thought about it before, though only out of curiosity. She'd never actually done it. Hikari told Tatsuo about the snow girl who was once taken to the student infirmary. The girl's name was Yuki, and her body was extremely cold. Because of that, Hikari often couldn't resist touching her. When Hikari noticed Yuki's neck, she started feeling curious and imagined how warm blood might be compared to Yuki's cold skin. At that moment, she realized she wanted to see Yuki's reactions to her playful teasing. However, Hikari knew she could never actually do something that might scare or upset her friend, since that would only make Yuki dislike her. Tatsuo thought that Hikari's imagination sounded a bit inappropriate, though Hikari herself didn't seem to notice it. He then asked if she had ever sucked blood from someone of the opposite gender. Hikari quickly denied it. Tatsuo asked again if she might prefer the blood of girls instead, but Hikari shook her head, saying maybe it was just because she had never fallen in love before. That made Tatsuo realize that for vampires like Hikari, drinking blood might have a deeper emotional meaning rather than just instinct. You could tell she didn't really take it too seriously, though she did hesitate a bit when he mentioned the idea of drinking blood from a man. Hikari was surprised that Tatsuo figured that out so quickly. According to Hikari, drinking blood directly from someone felt like something too intense, even cruel, and she wasn't the type to do that to others. She was dependable and kind, which made it difficult for her to even imagine doing such a thing. Tetsuo smiled as he looked at Hikari. She assumed he must be thinking about how fun it was to be young, while he was already a full-grown adult. Tetsuo just laughed at her comment. He could tell that Hikari was simply going through a normal stage of adolescence. Tetsuo then said it was time to end their conversation since he had to prepare for his next class. Hikari still wanted to chat more, but as the bell rang, Tetsuo gently told her to return to class. Hikari agreed, but before leaving, she playfully glanced at Tetsuo's neck and leaned in slowly, pretending as if she was going to bite him. Tetsuo was caught off guard and Hikari burst out laughing. He told her not to joke around like that, and she giggled, teasing that what she did earlier was kind of silly. When class ended later, Kyoko packed up her books. Not long after, Hikari came over to see her. Hikari asked how Kyoko was doing, saying that being her must be tough since she always had to carry her head around. She imagined how difficult it must be after school, holding her bag in one hand and her head in the other sounded dangerous. Kyoko was touched by Hikari's concern. She said she'd have gotten used to it, though she admitted it could be a little inconvenient at times. Hikari said she could understand because as a vampire, she also had her own struggles. She explained that she couldn't handle sunlight at all, and during summer, she couldn't even wear short sleeves because it felt unbearable. Kyoko laughed softly, saying that sounded troublesome. They both ended up laughing together about how unfair the world could be to them. Kyoko then asked where Hikari had gone during the lunch break. Feeling a bit shy, Hikari told her the whole story. Earlier that day, Kyoko had gone to the biology lab without bringing her head, which surprised Tetsuo. She handed him a letter she had written. Hikari and Kyoko's head were secretly watching from behind the door. In the letter, Kyoko thanked Tetsuo for helping carry her body to the student infirmary when she had a fever. She also wrote that Hikari had told her about him, and she asked if it would be alright for her to come by and chat with him sometime. Tetsuo wrote his response on the same letter and handed it back to her. Kyoko was a little startled when he gently touched her hand. After that, Kyoko and Hikari left the lab and went outside the school gates. They'd opened the letter to read his reply, and it said that Tetsuo would be happy to talk with her anytime. They both got really excited about it. Hikari was so overjoyed that she invited Kyoko to go have tea together to celebrate. That day, Kyoko came to the biology room to thank Tetsuo for carrying her body to the student infirmary when she had a fever. Tetsuo looked a bit nervous since the sight in front of him was rather unusual. Kyoko was a demi, belonging to the Dullahan type, a being from Irish folklore often linked to fairy legends. As a Dullahan, her head and body were separated. Tetsuo asked if it was safe to touch the flame around her neck and whether it was hot. He tried to reach out and touch it, realizing it wasn't hot at all. It felt more like touching the air, almost like it wasn't even there. Suddenly, Kyoko winced slightly, explaining that when someone touched the flame, it felt like her nerves were being tugged a little, which made it uncomfortable. Tetsuo quickly apologized, then asked if her body could really be considered part of her when separated. To prove it, Kyoko moved her body by guiding it with her hand, showing that it was indeed hers. Tetsuo was amazed by how connected the two parts were. He then asked whether when she fainted, it was okay to lift her head and body separately. Kyoko said it was fine, and he mentioned that once her body and head were as far apart as Tokyo and Okayama. She explained that her mother's parents lived in Okayama, and she visited them every year. But once, while she was saying goodbye on the train, it suddenly departed, leaving her head behind. Tetsuo was stunned. The situation was beyond anything he could have imagined. He realized that Kyoko's life must not have been easy. Kyoko said she managed those difficulties with help from her family, along with a mix of experience and cleverness to adapt to daily life. When she ate, she would hold her head in her arms, and when she bathed, she would hang it nearby. Tetsuo admitted that he learned a lot from her. Kyoko considered herself lucky to handle things on her own, but she also confessed that social interactions could be tough. People often got startled when they first saw her, and it always took a while before they felt comfortable around her. Because she had been sick, she missed the opening ceremony and was absent from school for 3 days. Even when she tried to push herself to go, she ended up collapsing again. She started to feel like there was some distance between her and her classmates, except for Hikari, who was always friendly with her. Kyoko noticed that her classmates avoided talking about Dullahans, even though she really wanted to joke about it sometimes. As she looked at Tetsuo, he asked whether she had ever tried making such jokes herself. She admitted she hadn't. Tetsuo suggested that maybe she could start there. Making light jokes could help set the mood and show her classmates what kind of humor she was comfortable with. He said it all came down to who would take the first step. Kyoko realized then that maybe her classmates were the ones unsure how to begin. Tetsuo laughed, saying that Kyoko was probably the first Dullahan they had ever seen. He mentioned that there were only 3 Dullahans in the entire world. Kyoko was surprised that he knew that fact and was deeply touched when Tetsuo said that all demi-students were precious. Her face turned red as she hesitated to ask for something. She finally told Tetsuo that she wanted him to give her a hug. The blue flame on her neck flickered brightly as she said it. Tetsuo was startled and asked if she was sure about her request. Kyoko clarified that she only wanted him to hug her head. Tetsuo gently held her head in his arms. Kyoko looked nervous but also happy. She said she really loved being hugged. Her parents often did that when she was little. But ever since she started high school, it told her she needed to grow out of that habit, even though she couldn't help it. There was no one else she felt close enough to ask for comfort like that. When a Dullahan's head was separated from its body, it couldn't move on its own and needed the touch of another person to be carried around. In a way, Dullahans naturally disliked being alone and could get lonely easily. Tetsuo released her gently and said that what he did probably wasn't appropriate for a teacher, though it was harmless as long as no one saw them. Still, it would be a big problem if the principal or Hikari happened to walk in. Unfortunately, Hikari did see them. Both Tetsuo and Kyoko froze in embarrassment as Hikari shouted, calling out to tell the others what she saw. Kyoko joked that after this, Tetsuo might become a Dullahan too, since she was sure someone might take his head off for it. Tetsuo panicked and quickly chased after Hikari, desperate to stop her from spreading the story. After school, Kyoko thanked Hikari because thanks to her, she had finally been able to talk with Tetsuo. Hikari laughed happily, remembering Tetsuo's panicked face from earlier that day. When she saw Yuki standing in front of her, Hikari rushed over and hugged her tightly, enjoying how cold Yuki's body felt. She didn't expect Yuki to live nearby. Hikari invited Yuki to walk home with her and introduced Kyoko along the way. Yuki said she had somewhere she needed to go, so she couldn't join them on the way home. Yuki, the snow girl from Class 1A, was described by Hikari as shy but kind. Hikari really liked how cool Yuki's body felt whenever she hugged her. When they reached the intersection, Hikari offered to have Kyoko stop by her place, but it was already getting late and Kyoko didn't want her parents to worry. A few moments later, Kyoko's phone rang. She struggled to reach it, so she stopped for a moment to answer. Her mother was calling and Kyoko explained that she was on her way home, apologizing because she had stayed a bit longer at school to talk with her teacher. That night, Kyoko straightened up her bed and got ready to sleep. She thought about how physical education class might be tough for her, so she made a note on her phone. She realized that Tetsuo was actually a kind person and she found herself wanting to talk with him again. The next day, Hikari was full of excitement when Kyoko told her she wanted to go on a date with a guy. Hikari couldn't hide her curiosity, but Kyoko still wasn't sure how the guy felt about her. Hikari was confident that he definitely liked Kyoko. After all, Kyoko was not only beautiful, but also charming in her own way. When Hikari noticed how doubtful Kyoko seemed, she asked if something was bothering her. Kyoko admitted that she felt uncertain because she was a Dullahan. She wondered aloud why being a Dullahan made it so hard for her to find love. Hikari guessed that Kyoko might have been thinking about the fact that there were only 3 Dullahans in the entire world. She told Kyoko that using that as an excuse to give up was silly. Hikari tried to lift her spirits, saying that being a Dullahan was actually what made Kyoko special. In her eyes, Dullahans were at the top of the romance pyramid. Hikari joked that Dullahans probably had their own unique ways of expressing affection. Kyoko was caught off guard and surprised that Hikari seemed to know about such things. Hikari then asked what kind of date Kyoko wanted. Blushing a little, Kyoko admitted that she liked when someone gently held her head, so she hoped the guy would carry it with him during their walk. She wanted to go anywhere with him, maybe somewhere quiet where if she looked out, she could see his face and a small movement would bring them closer together. It was a simple but sweet dream, and she really hoped it would come true. Hearing that, Hikari smiled warmly and called Kyoko a pure-hearted girl. She teased her, asking who the prince was that had captured her heart. Embarrassed, Kyoko hesitated to say it, but Hikari kept asking until Kyoko finally admitted that the person she wanted to go on a date with was Tetsuo. Hikari immediately grinned and without hesitation called Tetsuo right away, leaving Kyoko shocked by how fast she acted. The next day, Tetsuo and Kyoko met at Hikari's house. Kyoko's cheeks turned red when Tetsuo carefully held her head. Hikari encouraged them to go out shopping and told them not to come back until sunset. She couldn't help but notice how neatly dressed Kyoko was that day. Before they left, Kyoko had picked out a few outfits she thought would look nice for her date. However, her body would stay behind at Hikari's house and Hikari would be responsible for watching over it. When Hikari led Kyoko's body into the living room, she suddenly realized that Kyoko's body couldn't hear her while the head was away. Meanwhile, Tetsuo walked around carrying Kyoko's head gently in his arms. He asked what kind of experiment she was trying to do. Kyoko explained that if she ever found someone she truly liked, her head might start moving on its own, so she wanted to prepare for any problems that could come up when that happened. Tetsuo thought it was a good idea. At the same time, Hikari noticed Kyoko's body fidgeting nervously, as if trying to communicate something. It seemed to be making gestures, but Hikari couldn't quite understand them. She wondered what Kyoko and Tetsuo were talking about out there. Tetsuo and Kyoko later sat together on a park bench. Tetsuo rested Kyoko's head on his lap as they looked at the still green cherry blossom trees nearby. Kyoko said she hoped to see them again once they were in full bloom. She felt genuinely happy being there with him. Back at the house, Hikari watched Kyoko's body move and could tell from its subtle gestures that the date was going well. After a while, Kyoko's body reached into her bag, pulled out a notebook and pen, and began writing. Hikari was amazed that she could write without even looking. The message said that Kyoko was really enjoying the date and wanted to thank Hikari for everything. Reading that, Hikari felt relieved, but also oddly annoyed for some reason she couldn't explain. On a playful whim, she poked her fingers lightly into Kyoko's chest, and suddenly Kyoko let out a loud scream. Tatsuo was startled and quickly asked what was wrong. Kyoko's face turned red in embarrassment, and she said she had just remembered something funny. At that moment, back at the house, Hikari laughed when she saw Kyoko's body angrily waving its hands in protest, clearly upset with her teasing. Meanwhile, after leaving the park, Tatsuo invited Kyoko to take a walk around the city center and visit a few stores. While walking through the crowd, Tatsuo asked if everything was okay so far. Kyoko's face looked pale. She seemed to be feeling a bit motion sick. Seeing that, Tatsuo suggested they take a break and have some juice. After sitting down and drinking, Kyoko began to feel a little better. Tatsuo apologized, saying it was his first time going out with the Della-an. Kyoko smiled and mentioned that it was also her first time going out with the guy. Curious, Tatsuo asked if their little experiment had worked. It was only then that Kyoko realized the outing had been part of Tatsuo's experiment. As they continued chatting, Kyoko began talking about Yuki, the snow girl from Class 1A. She told Tatsuo about the time Hikari suddenly hugged Yuki while they were walking home together. Yuki, however, didn't seem to enjoy it. She looked startled and uncomfortable, and that had bothered Kyoko a little. Suddenly, Kyoko felt the urge to go to the restroom. When she spotted one nearby, her body instinctively stood up, but her leg accidentally bumped into the table. Her body stumbled awkwardly, which caught Hikari by surprise. Confused but quick to help, Hikari handed Kyoko a notebook and a pen so she could write what she needed. Kyoko quickly scribbled the word toilet on the page. Realizing the situation, Hikari burst into laughter and felt relieved, then gently guided Kyoko's body toward the restroom. At that moment, Hikari's younger sister Himari happened to come home. Hikari calmly explained that it was her classmate, Della-an. Afterward, Kyoko felt much better, though she admitted to herself that she probably shouldn't have had that juice earlier. Tatsuo then continued their stroll, and Kyoko told him she was feeling better than before. She even complimented him, saying he was really impressive. That made Tatsuo recall something he had learned back in school. When people walk, their bodies move slightly up and down. Without realizing it, they use their neck and eyes to keep balance. But for a Della-an like Kyoko, her arms serve the role of her neck, meaning she needs a dynamic way to maintain balance. When their walk came to an end, they returned to Hikari's house. Kyoko sincerely thanked Hikari for everything. Hikari was just about to bring up the restroom incident that had made her panic earlier, but Kyoko quickly covered her mouth in embarrassment. She also thanked Tatsuo for accompanying her that day, and Tatsuo in turn said he was grateful because he had learned so much from her. He gently patted Kyoko's head and said their experiment had been a big success. After that, Kyoko said goodbye and went home. Once she left, Hikari started telling Tatsuo more about Kyoko. The next day, Sakie noticed Tatsuo talking with the principal as they walked down the hallway. Tatsuo was asking the principal to allow Kyoko to use a backpack instead of a handbag. He explained that since one of Kyoko's hands was always used to hold her head, it was inconvenient and even risky for her to carry a regular bag in the other hand. The principal agreed to the request. Tetsuo also asked the principal to reconsider Kyoko's class advisor arrangements and wanted the request to be treated as an official directive from the principal himself. The following morning, Kyoko and Hikari greeted Tatsuo as they arrived at school. Tatsuo complimented Kyoko's new backpack, and Hikari said that Kyoko looked even cooler than usual. Tatsuo smiled and added that the backpack suited her perfectly. Every day, Sakie woke up early. She would wash her face and make breakfast right away. At that time, Sakie was 24 years old and still single. That morning, she was watching TV while enjoying her breakfast. The show was talking about love and relationships based on zodiac signs. Sakie couldn't help thinking that she probably couldn't hope for a normal relationship since she was a succubus. Early in the morning, she walked to the station. When she arrived, she was still sleepy and almost bumped into a man in front of her. She quickly stepped aside because she always tried her best to avoid physical contact with men. Not long after, the train heading to Shibasaki arrived. When Sakie reached the school, she immediately started cleaning. The principal greeted her and she looked quite nervous. The principal praised her for always coming in early and helping clean the place. Sakie said she simply liked keeping things tidy, though in truth, she came early because she didn't have much to do at home. As the students began arriving, they greeted Sakie warmly. That day, she noticed how close Hikari and Tatsuo seemed. Hikari asked Tatsuo to greet everyone with more energy that morning. She also thanked him for helping with the backpack approval issue, but Tatsuo was the one who thanked her instead, admitting that he should have thought about it earlier. Sakie realized that Tetsuo was actually a very kind person. She felt a bit bad for having scolded him before, but at that time she did it because she had to be careful not to touch men carelessly. After finishing her class, one of the students came to ask for help with a math problem. Sakie showed the student the correct formula, and the student thanked her. While she explained, the student couldn't help but look at her face and mentioned that she was really beautiful, suggesting she might look even better with more makeup. Sakie gently replied that her appearance was already fine the way it was. She avoided using too much makeup because it could unintentionally trigger her natural charm as a succubus, something that could make others overly attracted to her. Succubi like Sakie could release a natural charm that influenced others, especially men, but with discipline and modest clothing, they could keep things under control and live normally among people. While Sakie was walking down the hallway, Yusuke accidentally bumped into her. He immediately apologized, but the brief moment left him flustered, and he quickly remembered that Sakie was a succubus. To avoid problems like that, Sakie always took the very first and the very last trains each day to stay away from the morning rush. However, it wasn't easy. Waking up before dawn and getting home late every night started to exhaust her. One day, she dozed off on the train, and nearby passengers began acting oddly in their sleep. When a succubus falls asleep, she can't fully control her aura, and it might influence others' dreams without her intending to. That was why people sometimes called succubi dream demons. Because of this, Sakie couldn't live in regular apartment complexes or crowded neighborhoods. That night, she returned home, cleaned herself up, and sighed softly. She was ready to keep facing her daily life, even though it was hard for a succubus to live like everyone else. Sometimes she wondered if life would be easier if she could get married and have a family, but she had never been in a real relationship before. Being a succubus should have made dating easy. She knew that if she dressed more attractively, plenty of men would be drawn to her. But to her, that wasn't real love. Those feelings would only be illusions, not genuine emotions. She often wondered if men felt differently about love than she did when they fell for someone. That night, Sakie had a little sake at home. She felt free and relaxed in her own space. The next morning, she followed her usual routine, waking up, having breakfast, and catching the first train. When she arrived at school, she felt unusually sleepy, probably because she had drunk a little too much the night before. She lightly patted her cheeks to keep herself awake. Suddenly, she tripped and almost fell, but Tetsuo quickly caught her hand before she hit the ground. He asked if she was okay. It was only then that Sakie realized they were touching, and she immediately pulled away, blushing with embarrassment. Tetsuo simply smiled and reminded her not to focus only on taking care of the students but also to take care of herself. His calm reaction surprised Sakie. Most men would have reacted very differently after touching a succubus, even briefly. She began to wonder if maybe her succubus aura didn't affect people who naturally had stronger self-control or a calmer temperament. Sakie thought that perhaps when it came to love, she and Tetsuo might be on the same wavelength, something she had never experienced before. Tetsuo hadn't realized how long he'd been holding himself back ever since he stepped away from Sakie. As a succubus, Sakie naturally gave off a kind of alluring energy that could be hard to ignore, but Tetsuo managed to stay composed. When he finally returned to his office, he began working on another article about Demis. He had come to understand that a succubus, often referred to as a dream demon, was a type of Aegean who could unintentionally give off an aphrodisiac-like effect on others. In just a short time, he had already met a vampire, a Dullahan, and a snow woman. Not long after, Hikari stopped by his office to take a break. It was an extremely hot day, and being in class under the blazing sun had really worn her out. She peeked at Tetsuo's laptop screen and noticed what he was writing. Hikari was surprised to see that Tetsuo was writing an article about her. In his notes, Tetsuo had written about Hikari's sensitivity to sunlight, her eating patterns, the need for blood intake, and her reaction to things like crosses and garlic. He had also included some personal observations about how blood intake might relate to emotional or romantic feelings. Hikari blushed when she saw that part. Tetsuo apologized for mentioning something that might sound embarrassing, but Hikari actually found the topic interesting and wanted to talk more about it. Encouraged by her curiosity, Tetsuo asked a few follow-up questions about how vampires perceived affection and intimacy. He'd heard that drinking someone's blood might have a deeper symbolic meaning among vampires, and he wanted to understand it better. Hikari seemed flustered and asked if he was comparing that act to a kiss. Tetsuo wondered aloud if drinking blood could be considered something more personal than a kiss, but not necessarily romantic or intimate in the same sense. The question made Hikari's heart race, and with a shy expression, she explained that it really depended on the individual vampire. Tetsuo acknowledged that, but he wanted to know her personal opinion. Hikari admitted she had only ever drunk someone's blood once. When Tetsuo was about to ask more, he noticed how red her face had gotten and decided to ease off. He then explained that vampires might drink human blood when their own supply was low, but nowadays, the government provided support so that vampires didn't need to do that anymore. Based on that, Tatsuo concluded that drinking blood shouldn't be seen as something romantic, but more like an old cultural practice that had started to fade over time. Playfully, Hikari asked Tatsuo to lean in closer as if she wanted to whisper something. When he did, she quickly gave him a small kiss on the cheek. Tatsuo didn't react much, which made Hikari a little embarrassed. She laughed and said that kissing seemed easier than drinking blood. Tatsuo, ever the researcher, immediately jotted that down in his notes. Hikari was surprised that he even considered writing that in his article and tried to stop him. Tatsuo understood she was still young and easily flustered, but he genuinely wanted to understand how Demis experienced emotions and affection from their own perspective. That same day, Sakia was helping Kyoko carry some boxes to the library. Once they got there, Kyoko looked at Sakia closely and commented that she seemed very mature. Sakia smiled, wondering why Kyoko suddenly said that. Kyoko explained that Sakia seemed like someone with plenty of life experience, kind, graceful, and beautiful. Sakia blushed at the compliment. Then, Kyoko admitted she wanted some advice because she had feelings for someone. Sakia asked if that person was a student at the school. Kyoko replied that he wasn't a student, but he did work there. With a shy expression, Kyoko revealed that she liked Tetsuo. Sakia was completely taken aback. She liked Tetsuo too. Meanwhile, Yusuke had asked Yuki to hang out with him, but she turned him down. He kept asking, hoping she'd change her mind, but Yuki refused again and walked away. Tatsuo saw the scene unfold and lightly tapped Yusuke and Ookawa on the head to get their attention. Yusuke was confused and asked why Tatsuo did that. Tatsuo explained that he had actually been planning to talk to Yuki himself, but Yusuke's persistence had scared her off. Yusuke was shocked that Tatsuo had stopped him just because of that. Apparently, Tatsuo had been trying to talk to Yuki several times before, but she always avoided him. Ookawa suggested that maybe Tatsuo could call her over the school speaker system instead, but Tatsuo didn't want to make it a big deal. He just wanted to have a private conversation, and doing something too public might give the wrong impression. Soon, other students started gathering around, curious about what was happening. Tatsuo realized that Yuki was still just a teenager, and asking too many questions might make him seem insensitive. Meanwhile, Sakia asked what kind of advice Kyoko wanted from her. It turned out that Kyoko was worried she might seem too childish for Tatsuo. She wanted to be more mature but didn't know how. Sakia asked why Kyoko decided to come to her for that kind of advice. Kyoko explained that to her, Sakia looked like the perfect example of a mature and beautiful woman, someone who probably had a lot of experience with love. Sakia smiled and said that it only seemed that way. In her opinion, being an adult wasn't as impressive as it looked, and the kind of maturity that younger people admired was often just on the surface. She admitted that adults usually wanted to look admirable in front of others and be respected by younger people. Acting mature was often just a way to reach that goal. Maybe, she said, some adults were even a little arrogant, especially those who worked in environments where appearances mattered and they wanted to look cool. Kyoko asked if Sakia considered herself one of those people. Sakia laughed and admitted it, but asked Kyoko to keep it a secret. Sakia said she thought Tetsuo seemed genuinely mature, calm, relaxed, and dependable. He could get along with anyone, and she found that really impressive and cool. Then she asked Kyoko what she liked about Tetsuo. Blushing, Kyoko said that Tetsuo was kind and reliable. She also admitted she liked his strong arms, which made Sakia giggle and get a little carried away imagining it. Sakia suggested that Kyoko could try changing her fashion style and hairstyle to appear more mature. Kyoko agreed that it sounded like a great idea, but unfortunately, her hair couldn't grow long. If it did, it became too slippery and dangerous. Sakia apologized for not realizing that. Kyoko went on to say that Tetsuo once told her hairstyle looked cool because it was similar to his, so she couldn't really change it even if she wanted to. Hearing that made Sakia feel surprisingly jealous. Still, she thought to herself that even though she was a 24-year-old math teacher and still single, at least she could continue being a good and dependable adult. When school ended that day, the sky outside had turned gloomy. Yuki was walking alone through the hallway. As she passed by the restrooms, she overheard a few students talking about Yusuke from Class 1A trying to flirt with a girl during lunch. The girl they were talking about turned out to be Yuki herself. Yuki was shocked when she heard them say that she seemed a bit arrogant. They admitted she was cute, but wondered why she never wanted to hang out with anyone. One of them even joked that Yuki must think of herself as some kind of idol. Hearing those words made Yuki feel really hurt, and she quickly walked away. Not long after, heavy rain started pouring outside. Tatsuo was still at school when Hikari came by to say goodbye. Tatsuo returned the farewell, but Hikari told him to sound a little more energetic. He laughed and did as she asked, which made Hikari light up with joy. Tatsuo thought to himself that being carefree like that actually felt nice. After that, Hikari waved and ran off, and Tatsuo reminded her to be careful on her way home. As Tatsuo climbed the stairs to the upper floor, he suddenly noticed the air around him getting unusually cold. Then he spotted Yuki sitting quietly all by herself. Concerned, Tetsuo walked up to her and gently greeted her. Yuki couldn't stop hearing the words of the two students who had talked about her in the restroom. Feeling deeply hurt, she decided to go see Tatsuo. Unfortunately, when she opened the biology lab door, he wasn't there. Yuki sat down weakly in front of the room. The rain was pouring hard outside, and she could only sit there, replaying those painful words in her head. After a while, Tatsuo arrived and greeted her. He asked what was wrong, and Yuki told him she had just overheard some students saying cruel things about her. Tatsuo invited her to come inside so they could talk. Yuki asked if she was being treated that way because she was a demi. She was sure that if she weren't one, this wouldn't be happening. As she cried, Tatsuo gently pulled her into a comforting hug and told her that what she believed wasn't true. Yuki cried even harder, and her tears instantly turned into ice. Seeing that, Tatsuo realized he needed to protect her. From a distance, Hikari had been watching everything. Tatsuo thought gossip was a common problem among high school students, but for someone like Yuki, a demi, it wasn't that simple. Hikari and Kyoko had managed to accept who they were and live relatively normal lives. That day, Tatsuo was sitting in the cafeteria when Sakia came in after picking hydrangeas from the school garden. She asked if Tatsuo was still working, and he said that staying in the biology lab on such a gloomy, rainy day made him feel down. Sakia admitted she had misjudged him. She had recently learned about Kyoko's special backpack, which Tatsuo had arranged by asking the principal for help. She hadn't realized how much he cared about the demi students and regretted how cold she had been to him at first. Sakia sincerely apologized, and Tatsuo also apologized for not understanding her situation earlier. He explained that the idea for Kyoko's backpack had actually come from Hikari. Tetsuo said he wanted to understand the demi students better. Sakia walked closer and asked if she could help, since she was a demi too and also taught the demi students. She felt it was her responsibility to support them and believed she could truly help. She became so enthusiastic that Tetsuo started feeling a little nervous, but he agreed to let her join him. They began talking about Yuki. It turned out the students who had badmouthed her often gossiped about others too, so Yuki wasn't their only target. However, Yuki believed they did it specifically because she was a demi. Tetsuo asked Sakia what she thought about that. Sakia said that aside from the gossip issue, Yuki seemed to avoid interacting with others, and Tatsuo admitted he had noticed the same. Sakia believed Yuki probably had a reason for that, likely something tied to her demi nature. Tatsuo didn't quite understand what Sakia meant, so she explained that one reason she had misjudged him before was because she herself was a succubus. That made her very self-conscious and shy, and she suspected Yuki might be experiencing something similar. Sakia thought Yuki might not have anyone she felt close enough to talk to, which made it harder for her to accept herself as a demi. Tatsuo realized he should talk to Yuki, but Sakia offered to do it instead, believing it would be easier for Yuki to open up to another demi. Tatsuo was grateful for her help, and Sakia blushed a little, saying it was part of her job as a teacher anyway. Tetsuo agreed that talking to Yuki was important, but he also thought they needed to address the students who had insulted her. He believed those students shouldn't just be warned. They needed to understand why they acted that way in the first place. Their gossip came from insecurity and fear of showing their own weaknesses, which made them speak behind others' backs. Tatsuo hoped they could learn not to depend on gossip, and Sakia agreed. Still, Tatsuo admitted that expecting high school students to think that way might be a bit unrealistic. That same rainy day, Tatsuo was walking to his office when he overheard Hikari pulling Yuki along rather forcefully. Yuki didn't understand where Hikari was taking her. At that moment, two gossiping students were talking in the restroom about a physics teacher being transferred to another school. Hikari led Yuki to the restroom door. She told Yuki to stay there and listen to what she was going to do, and that afterward, Yuki could decide what she wanted to do next. Hikari went inside and called the two girls out, referring to them as cowards. The two, Itsumi and Shizuka, recognized her as Hikari, the vampire from Class 1B. Hikari told them that speaking badly about others behind their backs wasn't right and asked them to stop. Itsumi realized that Hikari was probably doing this to stand up for Yuki, who was also a demi. But Hikari made it clear that she was acting on her own. She didn't care who they talked about, but if she ever caught them doing it again, she would call them out directly. Before leaving, Hikari told them that if they wanted to gossip, they'd better find a place where she couldn't hear them. Meanwhile, Yuki overheard their conversation from outside the restroom when Tatsuo suddenly approached her. Shizuka asked why only they were scolded by Hikari, even though they weren't the only ones gossiping. Hikari explained that she would call out anyone who spoke badly about others. Shizuka wondered why Hikari was so insistent, since everyone had gossiped at some point. Hikari grew frustrated hearing that kind of reasoning. She questioned if that meant people thought it was acceptable to hurt others, and she wondered how they could say such things without feeling ashamed, knowing that no one would ever enjoy being talked about negatively. Hikari admitted that she never spoke about people behind their backs. If she had something to say, she would rather say it directly to their face, and if she couldn't, she would simply stay quiet. She realized that this wouldn't stop others from talking about her behind her back, and she was sure that after that conversation, Atsumi and Shizuko would probably gossip about her too. Hikari apologized to them for speaking that way. She had come to understand that even those who never criticize others can still become targets, maybe even more easily than anyone else. Still, she had made up her mind. If someone decided to talk badly about her, she wouldn't respond to it. Tears filled Hikari's eyes and she quickly walked away. Atsumi admitted that she didn't fully agree with Hikari's words, but she found herself admiring her. Hikari had spoken so passionately because she had made a promise to her younger sister. After Hikari left, Yuki approached Atsumi and Shizuka to apologize. She said that because of her natural traits as a demi, she often caused trouble without meaning to, and that was why she tended to avoid contact with others, something that probably left a bad impression. Atsumi was surprised and didn't understand why Yuki was the one apologizing. In the end, both Atsumi and Shizuka apologized to Yuki instead. That afternoon, the rain stopped and Hikari was still standing in front of the school when Tatsuo came over and gently patted her head. He then invited her to grab a meal together. When Hikari got home, she jumped into Himari's lap. Himari asked if something had happened at school, but Hikari brushed it off and said she just wanted to stay there for a while. The next day, Tatsuo and Sakie called Hikari, Kyoko, and Yuki to the audiovisual room. Tatsuo explained that a student had come to talk to him, which was why he gathered them there. Kyoko and Hikari both said they weren't the ones who had reported anything. Tatsuo looked puzzled and asked why they hadn't realized that the student must have been Yuki. He knew that certain things had been troubling the demi-girls and hoped that the three of them could support one another since they were the only demi-students in the school. Tatsuo encouraged them to build a good relationship and reminded them that if they ever couldn't talk to their friends about something, he was always ready to listen. Sakie also offered to be there for them whenever they wanted to talk. Tatsuo emphasized that discussing problems together was really important. When he asked if they had any questions, the room fell silent. He was about to end the meeting when Hikari suddenly mentioned that she had never been hugged by him before. Without hesitation, she walked up to Tetsuo and hugged him tightly, her face lighting up with joy. Before long, Kyoko also asked for a hug and Tatsuo placed his hands gently on her head, making her feel genuinely happy. Then Sakie half-jokingly asked if she could have one too, but Tetsuo quickly stopped her, reminding her that it could be risky because of her succubus nature. Sakie immediately realized what he meant and became flustered. Tetsuo then offered Yuki a hug as well while they were still there. Blushing, Yuki stepped closer and Tatsuo gave her a reassuring hug. He told her that he wouldn't force her to share everything she was going through, but he truly believed that it was no coincidence she was surrounded by other demis. He was confident that things would turn out fine and that she would be able to have fun like everyone else. Hikari then pointed out that Kyoko's body might want a hug too. Tatsuo agreed, and as soon as he hugged Kyoko again, he suddenly felt a strange sensation coming from her torso. Startled, he quickly let go and stepped back. The others looked at him curiously, wondering what had just happened. Later, at the shoe lockers, Himari heard from one of her friends that Tetsuo had gathered all the demi-students in the audiovisual room after school. Her friend also mentioned that Hikari had said Tatsuo was surprisingly kind, quiet on the outside but genuinely caring. Hearing that made Himari a little uneasy. She still wasn't sure if she could fully trust Tetsuo yet. Meanwhile, Tatsuo couldn't stop thinking about that odd moment when he hugged Kyoko. By chance, he ran into Himari as he was leaving the school and they ended up talking on their way home. Tatsuo learned that Himari always got good grades and liked to study in the library. He commented that she was very different from Hikari. Himari began to suspect that Tatsuo might know more about Hikari than he let on. She admitted that she was worried Hikari might be bothering him too much. Tatsuo replied that he often let Hikari come to his biology lab whenever the weather got really hot. Himari started to wonder if Tatsuo might have been using Hikari for some kind of experiment, though she wasn't sure if that was truly the case. Suddenly, Tatsuo remembered that he hadn't prepared the experiment for tomorrow's class. Meanwhile, Himari began to feel that she might have been overthinking things about Tatsuo. Not long after, Tatsuo started asking questions about vampire life. According to legends, vampires were supposed to hate garlic, but Hikari actually liked it. That made Tatsuo wonder if the old legends were even true. He also brought up how those same stories said that vampires attack humans at night. Himari explained that it was because vampires were sensitive to sunlight. Tetsuo continued to ask questions. He mentioned how people in the past carried crosses out of fear, and that books often described vampires as having excellent night vision, sharp hearing that could track humans, and a strong sense of smell capable of detecting blood. Based on that, he guessed that vampires might dislike garlic because its scent was too strong, just as the legend said. He then asked if Hikari actually had heightened senses. Himari confirmed that Tetsuo wasn't wrong. Hikari really did have sharp senses. When Tetsuo wondered why Hikari liked garlic despite that, Himari explained that Hikari simply wasn't picky about food. She had asked her the same question once, and Hikari had said she just liked foods with strong smells. Himari mentioned that a lot of people said Hikari didn't seem like a vampire at all, but rather just an ordinary high school girl. Curious, she asked Tetsuo why he was so interested in Demi life. She wondered if he thought Hikari wasn't like a vampire and if he was more interested in her human side. Tetsuo admitted that Hikari's personality didn't really fit the typical image of a vampire, but he pointed out that she still had a desire to drink blood. She managed it by consuming blood packs instead. Even though vampires had highly sensitive senses, Hikari still enjoyed strong-smelling foods. That combination of her human habits and vampire instincts, he said, was what made her unique. Tetsuo believed that what made people alike wasn't how they were born, but how they lived their lives. However, he also said that didn't mean they should ignore the traits that came naturally to them as Demis. Those instincts were part of who they were. To truly understand a Demi, one couldn't just look at one side of them. Seeing only the Demi side meant missing their personality, while seeing only the human side meant not understanding their struggles. Both sides were equally important for balance. At that moment, Himari was left speechless, though she found herself starting to believe in what he said. She told Tetsuo that next time he should come to her house and say those things in front of her parents. Tetsuo was interested and said he would like to talk to them someday. Not long after, Himari received a message from Hikari. She immediately showed it to Tetsuo, sounding upset. The message said that Tetsuo had hugged and attacked her earlier. Himari was really disappointed and angry with him. Tetsuo tried to explain that it was just a misunderstanding, but Himari left, calling him obsessed with demigirls. After school, Himari confronted Hikari about it. Hikari then explained everything. She admitted she was just bored at home because Himari came back late, and she didn't even realize that Tetsuo had been next to Himari at the time. Himari finally understood that it had all been a misunderstanding. One day, Yuki was soaking in the bathtub when she found herself staring at the water. Suddenly, the entire bathroom froze over. The moment she came to her senses, everything went back to normal. Yuki thought she could keep her identity as a snow girl a secret. If no one had spread the word that she was a Demi, maybe people wouldn't approach her out of curiosity. She believed that by keeping her distance, her natural abilities wouldn't cause problems for anyone else. During PE class, Yuki grew exhausted, and when someone tried to reach out to help her, she shouted, explaining that she was a snow girl and that she would be fine after cooling herself down. However, she eventually fainted. Her classmates quickly carried her to the student infirmary. Later that day, Yuki opened up to Tetsuo in the biology room. After hearing her story, Tetsuo asked if she had been hiding her identity as a snow girl her whole life. Yuki told him that before attending high school, she had lived in a snowy countryside where she never hid who she was. When her body temperature dropped, she would give off a cold aura, and sometimes her tears would turn to ice. No one ever felt bothered by it, so she saw it as normal and never had any problems with her nature as a snow girl. Tetsuo then asked if anything had changed since she started high school. Yuki admitted that she had been under a lot of pressure. She was anxious about entering a new environment, especially since she was separated from all her middle school friends. Having lived in the countryside her whole life, she wasn't sure she could handle city life. Fear took over her thoughts, and she even wished she could melt away in the hot bath water like in the old fairy tales. One day, as she soaked in the hot bath thinking about that wish, the water suddenly turned into ice. The incident terrified her. She began worrying about what might happen if the cold air coming from her body ever reached another person. That fear made her more and more stressed, and she convinced herself that avoiding physical contact was the safest option. That was why she distanced herself from everyone. She simply didn't know how dangerous she might be. Still, she wished she could tell people about it openly and introduce herself as a snow girl without fear. Tetsuo was still trying to wrap his head around Yuki's ability to freeze hot water. He asked how things were when she bathed. The question caught Yuki off guard, and she blushed slightly. Tetsuo quickly clarified that he was just curious about the temperature of the water and whether she usually bathed with other family members. Yuki explained that the water temperature she used was around 40 degrees Celsius, and she always took quick baths. At that time, she hadn't been crying, but pieces of ice suddenly appeared on the surface of the water. She also mentioned that she didn't sweat much since she had very few sweat glands. Tetsuo wondered if maybe the frozen bits had been her sweat, but Yuki said that her sweat had never frozen before, so it didn't make sense for that to happen only once. Not long after that, the school bell rang. Yuki quickly apologized for taking up Tetsuo's lunch break. He apologized too, saying he was the one who kept her talking for so long. Before leaving, Tetsuo asked her to meet him again after school. As Yuki walked down the hallway, she ran into Kyoko and Hikari, who had just finished their lunch together. They invited her to join them next time, and Yuki smiled at the idea. She told them she had just been talking with Tetsuo in the biology room and felt she might have said some strange things that made him think too hard. Hikari reassured her not to worry since she knew Tetsuo will always like having conversations with Demis. Kyoko then invited Yuki and Hikari to get ice cream after school, saying she had recently found a great place. Yuki didn't accept right away. She said she'd think about it first. After that, she headed back to her classroom. Meanwhile, Tetsuo was busy researching how a snow girl's body could make water freeze without changing its temperature. His temporary theory was similar to what Yuki had said earlier, that her tears might freeze under certain conditions. He dug through various references from internet articles to folklore books in the library. Interestingly, all the legends about snow girls carried a hint of sadness. After school, Tetsuo shared what he had found with Yuki. According to many legends, snow girls were described as beautiful women dressed in white, often with long hair. Some stories even portrayed them as elderly women, yet they all followed the same pattern. In each tale, the snow girl would approach a man and ask for something. If the man refused, she would bring misfortune, but if he showed kindness, something tragic would still occur, and the man would disappear. As Yuki listened, she felt her feet growing cold. Tetsuo quickly left the room and returned with warm water for her to soak them in. Then he handed her a book filled with old snow girl legends and asked her to read it aloud. He explained that it was important for her to do so, even if it was painful, because understanding those stories might help her face her fears and accept herself. The first story took place during a snowstorm when a snow girl visited a man's house. Seeing her pale white skin, the man invited her to take a bath, but she refused. The man gently pushed her toward the bathtub, yet as soon as she touched the water, her body melted away, leaving behind nothing but a block of ice. The second story told about two lumberjacks living in a rural village. On a freezing night, they sheltered inside their home, trying to escape the cold. Suddenly, the snow girl appeared. She breathed out a cold mist toward the older man, and within moments, he was frozen solid. The younger man was shocked but could not do anything. When the snow girl faced him, she only smiled and spared his life. Tetsuo asked Yuki to stop telling the story. Unexpectedly, small ice crystals began forming in the water container beside them. As Tetsuo suspected, those tiny ice grains were Yuki's sweat. Yuki was confused since she didn't feel like she was sweating, but Tetsuo explained that it was a kind of emotional stress reaction, often called cold sweat. He said cold sweat usually appears on the forehead, palms, or feet. Yuki praised Tetsuo for being so knowledgeable about it. Most legends about snow girls were tragic tales of unrequited love, loneliness, and eventually fading away like morning dew. According to Tetsuo, negative emotions and emotional stress might play a big role in shaping a snow girl's nature. He concluded that even stress-induced sweat would freeze. Tetsuo apologized for making Yuki feel pressured, explaining that he had to make her nervous to test his theory. He genuinely felt sorry for that. However, Yuki felt relieved instead. She believed that what Tetsuo did actually helped her feel more at ease. Tetsuo then mentioned that the ice in the bathtub was simply Yuki's cold sweat, formed because she was nervous about something. This meant she no longer needed to worry about the chill she gave off, since her coldness wasn't even strong enough to cool down hot water. He also said that the way Yuki accepted her nature during middle school wasn't wrong. Yuki didn't need to feel pressured or afraid of hurting others because she wasn't the kind of demi-human who could harm people. Hearing that, Yuki was deeply touched and began to cry. Tetsuo realized that if a snow girl's traits were triggered by negative emotions, they probably wouldn't appear when she was calm or happy. That explained why her warm tears didn't freeze. From that moment, he hoped Yuki could cry more often, but only from happiness. Yuki then asked how Tetsuo would describe her natural traits as a snow girl. Tetsuo said it might be like the crystallization of body fluids caused by emotional stress. He described Yuki as a crystal made from sweat and tears. His words sounded a bit awkward, and he quickly apologized, unsure how else to explain it. When Yuki asked what would happen to her frozen sweat, Tetsuo told her that he planned to analyze it. Yuki looked surprised and quickly took it back, saying that it felt inappropriate. Tetsuo denied any bad intention and jokingly wondered why Yuki seemed so cold. Yuki simply reminded him that she was, after all, a snow girl. Meanwhile, Hikari and Kyoko were looking for Yuki in her classroom, but couldn't find her. They assumed she had already gone home. A moment later, Yuki appeared and agreed to join them for ice cream. The three girls went to an ice cream shop and enjoyed their treats together. They looked so happy eating ice cream. Without realizing it, Hikari found herself staring at Yuki's neck. It reminded her of the first time they met, how she used to cling to Yuki. And because of that memory, she had started keeping her distance, especially after an awkward moment in the restroom before. Hikari asked whether Kyoko could eat her ice cream, and soon after, Yuki offered Hikari a taste of her own. Excited, Hikari opened her mouth, but her eyes again fell on Yuki's neck. She quickly pulled herself together and took the ice cream with her hand instead. She wondered what Yuki really thought of her, and, without noticing, finished the rest of the ice cream. Yuki didn't seem to mind at all. Yuki was aware that Hikari had been keeping her distance. She appreciated Hikari's thoughtfulness but still felt guilty about it and sincerely apologized. Yuki said she had learned to manage her interactions better and told Hikari that it was okay for her to touch or even hug her if she wanted to. Hikari was moved to tears and hugged Yuki tightly, feeling truly happy. She had always thought that Yuki disliked her because of that earlier incident. Then, half-jokingly, Hikari asked if she could lightly nibble Yuki's neck. Surprised, Yuki asked if Hikari meant to bite her, but Hikari quickly explained that she didn't intend to hurt her. She just had the odd urge because her teeth sometimes felt tingly when she saw Yuki's neck. She promised it would only be over her clothes. Yuki allowed it, and Hikari playfully hugged her and gently nibbled her through the fabric, which made Yuki giggle because it tickled. Seeing the two of them, Kyoko smiled and said that she, too, really wanted to be close friends with Yuki and felt genuinely happy about it. Hikari laughed and still playfully leaned in again, pretending to bite Yuki's neck once more as they all laughed together. Legends are often born from emotions like awe and fear, which is why there are so few with happy endings. The legend of the Snow Girl usually ends in tragedy, but Yuki, the Snow Girl, was destined to live differently, alongside her friends, a vampire, and a Dullahan. Tetsuo smiled as he watched the three of them enjoying their time together at an ice cream shop. The next day, they had lunch together at school. During their meal, Yuki asked Hikari what she usually did when she felt the urge to bite someone. Hikari explained that she would ask her twin sister Himari to lend her arm so she could bite it as much as she wanted. Not long after, Tetsuo stopped by to greet them. He felt genuinely happy to see how close the three had become. However, he was a bit surprised when Yuki casually mentioned his first name. While Tetsuo was glad that they were getting along well, he reminded Hikari to always be careful and to keep her impulses under control. Yuki then wondered why Tetsuo called only Hikari by her first name. Tetsuo explained that it was because there was another student, Himari, who shared the same last name as Hikari, so it was less confusing that way. Yuki still found it curious that he added Chan when addressing Hikari. When Tetsuo tried calling Hikari by different versions of her name, using her last name, her first name, and the Chan honorific, her reactions varied each time. Yuki quickly understood why Tetsuo preferred to call her by her actual first name. Yuki then suggested that Tetsuo call Kyoko by her first name too. Tetsuo didn't mind, but when he did, Kyoko's face turned bright red, and the flames around her neck glowed intensely. Embarrassed, Kyoko asked him to just call her by her last name, Maki. Hikari couldn't help but laugh, teasing Tetsuo for being rejected so quickly. Curious, Yuki asked Kyoko if she was really okay with that. Kyoko admitted that she felt a little shy, and her last name did sound a lot like a first name anyway. In the end, Tetsuo decided he would call everyone by their first names, except for Kyoko. Later, Tetsuo asked Hikari how she usually addressed other teachers. It turned out that she also called them by their names. Surprised, Tetsuo asked why she called him only sensei and not by name like she did the others. When he asked how she addressed the math teacher, Hikari said she used that teacher's first name. Tetsuo was shocked by her casualness. Seeing Yuki and Kyoko laughing at his reaction, Yusuke couldn't help but wonder why Yuki had suddenly become so cheerful. Kyoko quickly reminded Hikari that they had gym class next, so they hurried off together. When Tetsuo said goodbye to Yuki, he called her by her first name. Yuki was taken aback. Tetsuo wondered if she minded being called that way, but Yuki assured him that he could call her however he liked. Later in the hallway, Yusuke asked Hikari to give him a nickname. Hikari seemed unsure, and Yusuke kept asking eagerly, until it became clear that Hikari didn't even know his name. At that moment, Yusuke was sitting near the corridor when Yuki approached him to thank him for checking up on her the day before. She also apologized for turning down his invitation. Then, with a soft smile, she invited Yusuke to go karaoke with her after school. Overjoyed, Yusuke could hardly believe his luck, though he was completely caught off guard when he found out that Yuki had also invited her friends along. He had thought it was going to be just the two of them. One day, Tetsuo visited Hikari's house. Hikari's father was really happy to see him. He explained that in their family, his wife was the one who worked while he took care of the house. In the past, both of Hikari's parents had jobs, but after Hikari was born, one of them had to stay home to manage things. Hikari's father said he was already acquainted with the parents of Kyoko and Yuki. He also mentioned that thanks to Tetsuo, Hikari had become close friends with Yuki and Kyoko. Tetsuo humbly said he hadn't really done anything. Ever since learning that there was a teacher who understood Demis, Hikari's father had felt more at ease knowing his children were in good hands at school. Tatsuo told him that both Hikari and Himari behaved very well in class and that it was probably because they had great parents guiding them. He also hoped that Hikari would take her studies a bit more seriously. Hikari's father nodded and said that Himari often reminded her of that too. Not long after, Himari came home and Tatsuo greeted her right away. She thanked him for keeping his promise to visit their house and apologized about Hikari's message that had said Tatsuo hugged her. Tatsuo felt really embarrassed but was relieved that Himari didn't misunderstand the situation. She then asked Tatsuo to be a little stricter with Hikari because she didn't want her sister to be spoiled. Tatsuo agreed that even though Hikari and Himari were twins, they were completely different from each other. A few moments later, Hikari arrived home, cheerful as always. She was surprised to see Tatsuo there and immediately asked what he was doing in her house. Hikari's father explained that he had invited Tatsuo over for a chat. Hikari was amazed to see Tatsuo wearing a tie and quickly asked if she could take his picture. Soon after, Himari scolded Hikari for putting blood packs in the refrigerator and told her to use her own fridge instead. Hikari explained that she had bought her own fridge so it wouldn't bother anyone to see the blood packs out in the open. Himari believed that Hikari was just being lazy about carrying them to her room, even though she had promised to follow the rules once she had her own fridge. Hikari asked Tatsuo to say something to support her, but Tatsuo reminded her that she should follow the rules she had set herself. Himari then told Tatsuo that Hikari had been doing whatever she wanted ever since getting her own fridge, like hiding snacks so she could eat them alone, resting her feet on the fridge while reading manga, and even once sleeping with her head inside it, which made her catch a cold. Hikari was shocked that Himari was revealing all of that and jokingly warned her to stop before she said anything else. The sisters had always been a bit rough and tumble since they were little, and Hikari said she was getting fired up. Himari wondered why her sister kept talking about blood so much, and Hikari laughed, saying she was just trying to sound clever in front of their dad and Tatsuo. Himari pulled Hikari's hair lightly, saying that Hikari always tried too hard to look good in front of others. She also complained about Hikari's hairstyle taking too long to fix every morning, which sometimes made them late. Hikari asked Tatsuo to stop her sister, and Tatsuo simply commented that Hikari's hairstyle was cute. Hearing that, Hikari's face turned red with embarrassment. Himari noticed her blushing, but Hikari denied it, and the two started bickering again. Tatsuo asked Hikari's father if they were always like that. Slightly embarrassed, he admitted that they were always noisy, and that he never really knew how to handle it. Tatsuo laughed and said it was clear that the two were just really close. Hikari's father then invited Tatsuo to join them for dinner. Tatsuo thanked him and accepted. When their father asked what they wanted to eat, both Hikari and Himari immediately said they wanted liver and onions. Tatsuo was surprised that Himari also liked the same dish. It was one of Hikari's favorites. Hikari joked that maybe Himari was low on blood, which was why she had been so cranky earlier, and she playfully asked Tatsuo to scold her. Tatsuo just smiled and said that they were sisters through and through. Hikari laughed at his response. While Hikari's father was cooking, Hikari asked Tatsuo to take a photo with her. She told him to smile because she wanted to show the picture to Yuki and Kyoko later. Himari reminded her to behave properly while Tatsuo was there, but Hikari teasingly asked if Himari wanted to join the photo too. Of course, Himari refused immediately. Just then, Hikari's mother came home and was surprised to see Tatsuo in her house. Tatsuo greeted her politely. Apparently, Hikari had already told her mother quite a lot about him. She apologized if Hikari ever caused him any trouble. Dinner was ready soon and they all ate together. After the meal, Himari scolded Hikari for finishing her ice cream. Hikari apologized, saying she must have mistaken it for her own. Himari didn't believe her, certain Hikari was lying. The two of them started bickering again, but their mother could only smile as she watched. After all, they were always like that. She explained that Hikari had bright glowing hair ever since she was born, which was why she was named Hikari, meaning light. Meanwhile, Himari's name was chosen simply because it sounded similar. Later, Hikari asked Himari to go to her room together so she could replace the ice cream she had eaten. Hikari's mother mentioned that even though Hikari was a vampire, she was no different from other girls. She admitted that she used to worry about Hikari too, but their family had learned to face things together. They considered Hikari's vampire side as just one of the many traits that made her unique. Even if she weren't a demi, twins would still have their own differences. Tetsuo also realized that although Hikari and Himari looked alike, they were completely different in personality. Meanwhile, Himari looked irritated when she found out that Hikari had forgotten she had already eaten the ice cream stored in her room. Hikari apologized again and promised to buy her a new one. She suggested they go to the convenience store together to get it, but Himari wondered why they both had to go. Hikari said she just didn't want her sister walking to the store alone at night. Himari refused and told Hikari to go by herself. Hikari's father offered to go with her, but Himari stopped him, saying he shouldn't spoil Hikari so much, especially since Hikari often went out at night to grab snacks on her own. Hikari's mother then said she would accompany Hikari because she also needed to buy something at the convenience store. When Tatsuo was about to excuse himself, Hikari's mother stopped him, saying they'd only be gone for a short while since the store was nearby. She then asked Himari to keep Tatsuo company and chat with him. Tatsuo started to realize he might have stayed at their house longer than he intended. Himari complained about how her parents always spoiled Hikari. Tatsuo commented on Hikari's father's blonde hair, and Himari explained that he dyed it so Hikari wouldn't stand out too much in their family. Tatsuo then pointed out that Himari's hair also looked brighter lately, guessing she did it for the same reason. Himari got flustered and insisted it was just for fashion. Tatsuo could tell that the two sisters were actually very close. Meanwhile, Hikari asked her mother what she wanted to buy at the convenience store. Her mother replied that she wanted to get some beer and added that she was sure Tatsuo probably liked beer too. The next morning, Himari was ready to head to school when Hikari suddenly asked her to help fix her hair. Himari smiled but refused right away. That was her way of helping Hikari learn to be more independent. Later, she told Tatsuo about it when they were in the library. Tatsuo said that was pretty harsh of her, but Himari explained that since Hikari was already in high school, she needed to learn to handle things on her own. Himari even told him about the time Hikari accidentally fell asleep in the bathroom at night. Tatsuo suggested it might have something to do with her vampire instincts, since vampires could see well in the dark. Hikari had once said she didn't use the light in the bathroom because it was too bright, and Tatsuo figured that was probably why she ended up falling asleep. Himari, however, thought Hikari was just being careless. Tatsuo then mentioned that maybe Hikari's trouble with her hairstyle was also related to vampire instincts. Since vampires were said not to have reflections in mirrors, maybe that was why she found it difficult to do her hair and always asked Himari for help. He added that the theory did explain a few things, but it could also just be a myth, and maybe Hikari was simply a bit absent-minded. Suddenly, Himari realized she might have been unfair to her sister. She quickly ran off to look for Hikari, thinking that if vampires really didn't have reflections, then Hikari truly did need her help. Himari checked Hikari's classroom, but she wasn't there, so she kept searching around the school. It looked like it was about to rain that day. Kyoko mentioned to Yuki that she might call for a ride home since carrying an umbrella was a bit of a hassle. Not long after, Himari arrived but didn't find Hikari in the usual spot where she hung out with Yuki and Kyoko. Himari felt guilty for judging Hikari too quickly, assuming that she was just lazy and acting like she knew everything. In truth, Hikari had been struggling a lot. Not long after, Himari went to talk to her and admitted everything she had thought. But to her surprise, Hikari told her that she could still see her reflection in the mirror. Tatsuo then apologized for making Himari misunderstand the situation. To prove her point, Hikari invited Himari to check in herself. She said she was sure Himari must have been worried about her. Hikari told Himari that she was too kind, which made her quick to assume things. Hikari then hugged her and apologized for making her worry. Himari asked why she always had to help Hikari fix her hair, and Hikari admitted that she had always been lazy, even since they were kids. Hearing that, Himari immediately tugged on Hikari's hair in frustration. Meanwhile, Tatsuo thought about how, even if vampires didn't have reflections, that wouldn't mean Hikari had lost her sense of self. Himari, who truly understood and cared for her sister, was always the one closest to her. As Hikari tried to escape Himari's playful punishment, Himari reminded her that she had left something behind. Instead of going back, Hikari told her sister to bring it to class. Himari got annoyed but still did it anyway. Tatsuo thought to himself that Himari really was the picture of a perfect younger sister. That day, heavy rain started pouring. Hikari and Kyoko were still in class when Hikari received a message on her phone. She smiled softly after reading it and decided to go home right away. At the same time, Tatsuo and Sakia had just finished a meeting and were walking together down the school hallway. Sakia mentioned that she often went home late at night because she preferred to take the last train. There would be fewer people around, which was better for her as a succubus. Tatsuo realized that being a succubus must come with its own kind of trouble since they naturally emitted a kind of charm, but Sakia said she had already gotten used to managing it. Before leaving, Sakia gave Tatsuo a teasing smile and thanked him for his help. Then she quickly walked away, realizing that her natural charm seemed to have no effect on him. However, Tatsuo quietly admitted to himself that Sakia's presence was actually very alluring, even if he managed to stay composed on the outside. He then headed to the biology lab. When he opened the door, he was surprised to find Kyoko asleep inside. Tatsuo gently placed a blanket over her. The rain outside grew heavier, and after a while, he dozed off too. When Kyoko woke up, she noticed the blanket over her shoulders and saw Tatsuo sleeping at his desk. Smiling softly, she brushed his hair. Unexpectedly, Tatsuo woke up and looked flustered. Kyoko then covered him with the blanket instead and joked that even though their hairstyles looked similar, his hair was much rougher than hers. Tatsuo didn't know how to react. Just then, Hikari's father arrived and greeted Kyoko. She asked why he had come to the school. He explained that Hikari's parents were busy, so he came to pick Kyoko up instead. He was surprised that Hikari hadn't told her about it, even though he had asked her to. Kyoko realized that Hikari must have been smiling earlier because she was keeping that secret. Hikari's father apologized for the confusion, and Kyoko thanked him for taking the time to come all the way there. He said it was no trouble since Kyoko's parents often helped his family too. It was only fair that they supported each other. Before leaving, Hikari's father noticed that Tatsuo was still asleep and suggested they leave him a note. Kyoko mentioned that her bag was still in the classroom. Hikari's father offered to carry her head there himself, saying he should get used to it. Kyoko was surprised but agreed, and she even complimented him for carrying her so smoothly. After they left, Tatsuo woke up and found Kyoko's body sitting at the desk, writing a thank you note to him for the blanket. He praised her for being able to write without looking and said she must have practiced a lot. Tatsuo thought that all the Demi students were trying their hardest in their own ways, and their parents worked just as hard to support them. Meanwhile, Hikari and Himari were already waiting for Kyoko in the car. One day, Hikari appeared in a panic and rushed into the biology room to meet Tatsuo. She explained that there was a suspicious person wandering around the school, someone as big as a bear with curly hair and eyes that looked wild as if watching prey. Tatsuo sketched the person based on her description and confidently concluded that it must have been a bear. That same day, Sakia noticed a student crying in the hallway. The student's uniform wasn't from Shibaseki High School. Concerned, Sakia approached and gently asked if the student was alright. After introducing herself, Sakia learned that the student's name was Kurtz. From his appearance and accent, she guessed he might be half German, recalling what she had studied about Germany back in college. Sakia asked what Kurtz was doing there, and he explained that he had come with someone but got separated along the way. She then asked if he was visiting with his parents to fill out transfer forms, and Kurtz admitted that he was, but Sakia sensed he might not be telling the full truth. Even so, she felt he didn't seem like a bad kid. Not long after, Yuki and Kyoko passed by and greeted Sakia. Kurtz was amazed when he saw Kyoko's detached head floating beside her. Sakia calmly explained that Kyoko was a Dullahan, a type of Aijin, and asked if Kurtz was interested in Aijin. Kurtz quickly denied it, but Sakia could tell he was being evasive. She wanted to ask about his real reason for being at the school, but decided to hold back. Sakia briefly considered using her succubus ability to sense the truth, but chose not to. When she tried to leave to find Kurtz's parents, he suddenly stopped her by grabbing her hand. To her surprise, her ability didn't affect him at all. She realized that some people might have very low sensitivity to such influences, and it seemed Kurtz was one of them. A few moments later, Tatsuo arrived to tell Sakia that Hikari had reported seeing a suspicious person around the school. Sakia was surprised, and Tatsuo admitted that Hikari might have exaggerated things, but still reminded Sakia to stay alert. Sakia took the matter seriously, though Kurtz noticed she seemed doubtful. He thought that if he wanted to earn her trust, he needed to prove himself by dealing with the suspicious person. He even promised that he would confront the intruder himself. Tatsuo asked who the student was, and Sakia introduced Kurtz to him. She suspected that the person Hikari had seen might be connected to Kurtz somehow. A moment later, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the school corridor. Tatsuo mentioned that the suspicious figure was described as being huge, almost like a bear. Just then, a tall and broad-shouldered man walked past behind Tatsuo. Believing that was the intruder, Kurtz immediately leaped forward and pinned him to the ground with surprising strength, causing the large man to groan in pain. Sakia and Tatsuo were both shocked until Sakia suddenly recognized the man. It was Ogeki. Realizing his mistake, Kurtz froze. It turned out Ogeki had actually been looking for him all along. Ogeki looked confused and asked what Kurtz was doing there. Kurtz called him Senpai, which surprised both Sakia and Tatsuo. Sakia then explained that Ogeki was an acquaintance of hers and detective she had known for quite some time. Tatsuo was astonished by this. Ogeki wondered how Kurtz could have mistaken him for someone suspicious, and Kurtz quickly apologized. Tatsuo couldn't believe that Sakia personally knew this man, and Sakia revealed that Ogeki was an old acquaintance. When she asked who Kurtz really was, Ogeki explained that Kurtz was his subordinate. Kurtz looked embarrassed that Sakia now knew the truth. Tatsuo reminded Ogeki about the rule that any visitor entering the school grounds must report to the office. Ogeki agreed and told Kurtz to do so, though Kurtz seemed reluctant. Tatsuo quietly thought Kurtz looked too young to be a detective and noted that he resembled a foreigner. He was surprised that the police department would recruit someone like him. In the end, Kurtz said he would report to the office only if Ogeki bought him some takoyaki. Since outdoor shoes weren't allowed in school, Sakia handed Ogeki a pair of indoor slippers. She asked why he had come to the school when they usually met at a cafe. Oveki explained that he was curious to see the 4 Demi students attending there. Sakia then asked him about Kurtz, but Okeki turned the question around, asking if something had happened between her and Kurtz. Sakia told him that they had briefly touched hands, but nothing strange had occurred. Oheki didn't elaborate much, only saying that it was something complicated to explain. Meanwhile, in the teacher's office, Kurtz was filling out a visitor report with Tatsuo's help. When Tatsuo asked him to write down his name and occupation, Kurtz nervously insisted that he had nothing to do with Aijin. At the same time, Oheki explained to Sakia that Kurtz was specially trained as a countermeasure against Sukubi. When Oheki asked if Sakia was feeling alright, she calmly said she was fine. Oheki expressed admiration for her strength and maturity, saying that most Sukubi tended to avoid others, live in isolation, or behave carelessly without much regard for human norms. It was rare, he said, to meet someone as thoughtful and grounded as her. As Oheki reached for a cigarette, Sakia quickly reminded him that smoking was not allowed on school grounds. Oheki chuckled and said that Sakia had really grown into a responsible adult. He then half-jokingly suggested that maybe it was time for him to think about settling down and starting a family. He even offered to introduce her to some nice men he knew. Sakia was taken aback by the sudden change of topic and asked why he was bringing that up. Oheki simply said that he worried about her. After all, she was a young woman living on her own, and he had known her since she was a child. Sakia laughed and told him he sounded just like her father, perhaps even more fatherly than her real one. Sakia admitted that she already had someone she admired, which surprised Oheki. She found his reaction strange since he was the one who brought up the topic in the first place. Oheki explained that he was just surprised because in the past, Sakia always avoided such discussions, usually saying that she didn't want to take any unfair advantage to get a boyfriend or that she hadn't yet understood what true love meant. He never expected that Sakia would already have someone in mind. Feeling a bit embarrassed, Sakia jokingly threatened to touch him, but Oheki quickly stopped her, saying that an old man like him might have a heart attack if his heart started racing like that. Sakia laughed and explained that the man she liked didn't seem to have a strong romantic or physical desire, and even when she accidentally touched him, her succubus effect didn't seem to work on him at all. Oheki couldn't believe there was a man like that unless he was someone completely unaffected by such things. He insisted that it was impossible for any man to resist the natural charm of succubus. But Sakia was convinced that this particular person truly didn't react to her at all. Oheki suggested that maybe it only looked that way, and that the man was just good at hiding his reaction. He thought this man probably knew a lot about Demis, which might explain it. Sakia started to wonder if that could be true. Oheki then asked whether she still liked the man even after realizing that he wasn't some special person immune to her powers, but rather someone who might just be hiding his feelings. That made Sakia blush and feel flustered. Oheki told her that if she didn't mind whether the man was affected by her charm or not, it probably meant she genuinely liked him. Sakia admitted that she really did feel drawn to him, especially when she realized that her charm actually did affect him. The contradiction between her thoughts and feelings made her heart race even more. She started to wonder if love might actually be like what those romance guidebooks describe, something that often begins with a misunderstanding. Sakia kept talking about love, getting more and more embarrassed as she tried to make sense of her own feelings. Meanwhile, Kurtz was walking down the school hallway, hoping that no one would notice his connection to the Aijin. At the same time, Hikari was chatting with Kyoko and Yuki about a suspicious-looking person she had seen. She described the person as tall and broad like a bear, with messy hair and sharp eyes that looked like those of a wild animal watching its prey. Kyoko got scared hearing that, but Yuki joked that maybe it actually was a bear. Without realizing it, Hikari accidentally bumped into Kurtz, and for a moment thought it was Sakia. She was surprised to see a stranger with blonde hair and asked why his uniform looked different. Assuming he must be a transfer student, she asked about it, and Kurtz didn't deny it. He quickly left, trying to avoid drawing attention. Hikari had a feeling that Kurtz wasn't really a transfer student after all, and she couldn't understand why she had mistaken him for Sakia when he was clearly a man. Yuki, on the other hand, started to suspect that Kurtz might be up to something. As Kurtz continued walking through the hallway, he saw 2 students looking at a photo of Sakia on one of their phones. Yusuke had secretly taken that picture, thinking that photos of a succubus could somehow make people feel captivated. Kurtz immediately stepped in, grabbed the phone, and told them to stop looking at Sakia's photo in that way. Yusuke was shocked and didn't understand who Kurtz was or why he had taken his phone. Kurtz introduced himself as a detective and said that taking someone's picture, secretly, was cowardly. Yusuke realized his behavior was wrong and admitted that he was just a high school student dealing with all the confusing emotions that came with adolescence. He said it was hard not to find Sakia attractive. Kurtz told him that Sakia was indeed a succubus and asked if Yusuke still admired her knowing that. Yusuke replied that even if Sakia weren't a succubus, she would still be a kind and sweet person in his eyes. Hearing that, Kurtz smiled and said that was a good answer. He returned Yusuke's phone and told him he could keep the picture just this once, but advised him to be more respectful in the future. After that, Yusuke continued walking through the hallway looking for Oheki. he found him in the smoking room. A moment later, Tatsuo walked in and greeted Okeki. When Tatsuo took out a cigarette, Okeki lit it for him. Okeki was surprised to learn that Tatsuo smoked, but Tatsuo explained that he had actually quit 2 years ago and was only smoking that day to keep Okeki company. Tatsuo had heard about Okeki's work involving the Ajin. Okeki guessed that Kurtz must have been the one who mentioned it. He then explained that he and Kurtz both worked for a division called the Ajin Department. According to Okeki, there weren't many Ajin and only a few of them ever got involved in serious problems. Tatsuo asked Okeki what kind of work he did. Okeki explained that his job actually had nothing to do with Ajin at all. He said that the world used to be a much harsher place for Ajin, as many of them suffered socially and psychologically. There were even Ajin who caused trouble in the past, but that kind of situation no longer existed because people had become more understanding and accepting toward them. Okeki realized that changed that very day. He was surprised to see the 3 Ajin at the school looking so happy, and he was deeply moved by it. It made him feel that the world was indeed heading in a better direction. He was sure that the parents of those Ajin must have played an important role, and that they were fortunate to have good teachers. Tatsuo smiled and apologized for having taken over the duties that originally belonged to the Ajin division. Okeki replied that there were certain tasks of the Ajin division that someone like Tatsuo couldn't possibly handle. Tatsuo didn't quite understand what Okeki meant by that. Okeki then explained that most Ajin-related incidents usually came from the stimulating effects produced by a succubus. He said that sometimes, when a succubus ended up in a situation that looked like harassment, it wasn't always clear whether she had intentionally released her charm effect or not. There were cases where a succubus could accidentally cause such effects, but there were also cases where one might misuse them. According to Okeki, figuring out whether a succubus did it intentionally or unintentionally was very difficult. And that sort of investigation wasn't something a teacher could simply take over. Tetsuo then asked if there was a fair judicial method for handling such cases. Okeki admitted that there really wasn't any clear or perfect way to deal with those issues. What the Ajin division could do was to maintain communication with the succubi within their jurisdiction and determine early on whether they posed any risk or not. Tetsuo assumed that Okeki must be disliked by many succubi because of his work. Okeki said that he always tried to explain his role to them, and that he never wanted to be hated by them in the first place. He admitted that sometimes he did meet a few succubi who treated him kindly, unlike most others. He mentioned that he had met Sakia back when she was still a student. Okeki believed that Tetsuo seemed to know a lot about Demis and asked him to take good care of Sakia and the other demigirls at the school. He entrusted them to Tetsuo and hoped he could help them create happy, memorable experiences. Tetsuo agreed to do that, and the two of them shared a laugh together. Tetsuo then asked if there was anything specific he should be careful about when communicating with Demis. Okeki said that he never tried to make them like him. His goal was simply to make sure they didn't dislike him. According to Okeki, if a regular girl hated him, that would count as 100 points, but if a demigirl hated him, that would be 10,000 points. That was how complicated it could be. He also joked that Tetsuo might end up being disliked for unexpected reasons. Not long after, Hikari came running up to Tetsuo cheerfully. Okeki greeted her warmly and introduced himself, and Hikari did the same. Her cheeks turned red when he called her young lady. Then, out of nowhere, she mentioned that she didn't like the smell of cigarettes and quickly walked away, leaving Tetsuo behind. After that, Okeki left with Kurz. On the way, he began explaining his job in detail, but Kurz didn't really listen. He was too busy enjoying his takoyaki. That day, the list of midterm exam rankings at Shibaseki High School was finally posted. Hikari was so excited that she dragged Yuki along to check it out. It turned out Hikari wanted to show off her little sister's ranking to Yuki. She was really proud of Himari. Yuki then told her that Kyoko ranked 5th. Yuki honestly didn't expect Kyoko's test scores to be that good. Hikari was completely shocked when she heard it. No wonder Kyoko had refused to show her test results. Hikari thought Kyoko had done poorly, but now it seemed like Kyoko had just felt bad for her after seeing Hikari's own grades. Not long after that, Tatsuo walked up to them. Yuki told him about Kyoko's rank, and Tatsuo mentioned that Yuki's grades were actually pretty good too. He said he hoped Yuki wouldn't think that the top-ranking students were out of her league. Meanwhile, Hikari looked frustrated, realizing that she had assumed Kyoko was as careless as she was. Tatsuo told Hikari she might have to take extra classes, since her grades in all subjects were pretty low, and 3 of them were even failing. He reminded her that just because she was a vampire didn't mean all her grades had to be in the red. Instead of feeling jealous about other people's scores, he told her it would be better if she focused on learning from her own mistakes. Hikari then pleaded with Tatsuo to give her a comforting hug, but instead, he just walked away. Feeling rejected, Hikari grew upset, while Yuki thought the whole thing looked like a scene from a drama. She hadn't expected Hikari to actually cry. Hikari admitted she didn't want Tatsuo to hate her and didn't know what to do anymore. As Hikari sobbed and clung to Yuki, They both lost balance and fell, scattering Yuki's books all over the floor. Yuki gently told Hikari that Tatsuo wasn't angry because he disliked her, he was just disappointed that she hadn't studied. So, if she wanted better grades, she simply needed to work harder. Since they still had an upcoming academic aptitude test, Hikari begged Yuki to teach her how to study for it. Later, when Yuki got to class, she planned to relax and read a manga, but realized her manga wasn't in her bag. Around the same time, Sakie found a manga titled Van Dersen lying in the school hallway. She thought it was quite interesting and remembered that her father used to read that series. She wondered why such a book was just lying around at school. Not long after, Yuki appeared, relieved to see her manga safe and sound. She apologized for bringing it to school, and Sakie said it was fine as long as she didn't read it during class. Sakie was surprised to learn that Yuki liked such a goofy comedy manga. Yuki quickly denied it, claiming that it was actually her classmate who wanted to read it, and that she had only brought it because she'd seen it at home. She said her parents were manga fans, so there were lots of manga at her house. Even though Yuki said she wasn't really into silly comedy manga, that was actually a lie. The truth was, she would have been super embarrassed if anyone found out she enjoyed reading it, probably because the humor in it was a bit mischievous and over the top. Yuki just hoped Sakie wouldn't notice. Sakie then pointed out that it was volume 7, asking why Yuki didn't start from volume 1. Yuki nervously replied that she must have mixed them up because the numbers 1 and 7 looked similar. Of course, that wasn't true either. After the exams, she had started reading the manga and got completely hooked, so she just wanted to continue it at school. Sakie mentioned that Van Dersen was actually a pretty famous series. It told the story of a gentlemanly vampire thief named Van Dersen who punished corrupt rulers by draining their blood, all told with a touch of humor. The notes he sent to his targets were hilarious, written in code that always ended with the same phrase, "Not enough blood." Once the target decoded the message, Van Dersen would appear and carry out his ironic punishment. Yuki almost burst out laughing when she heard Sakie describe it that way. Yuki then mentioned that there was also a well-known manga about a snow girl, though she hadn't read it yet. Sakie recognized it immediately. It was Yukikoi, or Snow Love. The story followed a snow girl who left her hometown to find her place in the world, and its TV drama adaptation was set to air in the fall. Sakie explained that Yukikoi was a mature romance story, which was why the language in it was a bit more grown up. Hearing that, Yuki nearly choked on her own breath, thinking that maybe she should check it out herself. Sakie asked whether Yuki ever got teased in class since Yukikoi had become so popular. Yuki admitted that people sometimes gossiped about her, but it didn't really bother her. After all, it was just fiction. She trusted that her classmates could tell the difference between fantasy and reality. She even added that every fictional work always came with a note making it clear that it was just that, fiction. Yuki pointed out that in stories, snow girls were often portrayed as powerful beings who could summon blizzards and freeze anything with icy energy, while in real life, they tended to be much more reserved and gentle. Yuki asked Sakie about her being a succubus and yet often being the one who got teased instead. Sakie admitted that such things had indeed happened to her before. She told Yuki that back in middle school, her succubus abilities started to show, and people began to gossip once they found out what she really was. Around that time, Thakun, the leader of a group of troublemakers, tried to cause trouble with her. He intentionally got too close, hoping to provoke a reaction. Fortunately, Sakie had trained in judo, so she instinctively threw him down to protect herself, which left him in pain. Unexpectedly, Thakun's reputation completely crumbled after that incident, and no one from his group dared to bother Sakie again. In the end, the story turned out well for her. After hearing the story, Yuki groaned softly, which left Sakie feeling a bit confused. That day, Kyoko, Yuki, and Hikari were studying together in the library. However, Hikari kept asking Kyoko for help because she was having such a hard time understanding the material. Yuki reminded Hikari not to bother Kyoko while she was studying. Hikari complained that she had already done remedial classes and now there was another test coming up. Kyoko reassured her that explaining things to others was actually a good way to study and she didn't feel bothered at all. Hearing that, Yuki also asked Kyoko to help her with the final chapter. Kyoko happily agreed to help both of them. Yuki admitted that she was really impressed with Kyoko for ranking 5th in their class. She quickly apologized if that comment sounded awkward. Kyoko wasn't offended in the slightest. Hikari jokingly guessed that Kyoko's parents must have pushed her to study all the time. Kyoko said she couldn't really remember if that was true, but maybe her father used to say things like that. However, he didn't anymore because now Kyoko studied entirely by her own will. Hikari was genuinely surprised to hear that, while Yuki asked if Kyoko was just that self-disciplined. Kyoko denied it and explained that she simply liked working hard and feeling that her effort paid off through good grades. It seemed that Kyoko actually enjoyed the process itself. Hikari said that it sounded like playing a game. Kyoko agreed, adding that she didn't do it for her future, but simply because she found it fun. Yuki said that in video games, people usually get motivated when they see someone who's really skilled. Hikari replied that it wouldn't make sense to feel better just because someone else played worse than them. Kyoko laughed and said she had just learned something new, how to joke around. Hikari realized that for people who couldn't think of studying as a game, they would just have to put in extra effort. Yuki teased that Hikari's real reason for studying was probably to get praise from Tetsuo, and she sincerely hoped Hikari would succeed. Kyoko was surprised to learn that Tetsuo actually complimented hardworking students. Hikari said that since Tetsuo was a teacher, of course he would praise students who studied diligently. Yuki then mentioned that Tetsuo had once said Kyoko was impressive. Hearing that, Kyoko decided she would aim for first place, but then quickly laughed it off, saying she was only joking. Yuki and Hikari couldn't help but gently pinch Kyoko's cheeks because she was just too adorable. The next day, Hikari was relaxing in Tetsuo's office. Tetsuo commented that she seemed quite at ease after finishing her remedial sessions and reminded her that there would be an academic aptitude test the following week. Hikari promised she would study after school with Yuki and Kyoko in the library. However, Tetsuo suspected she might end up distracting them instead. Hikari denied it, explaining that Kyoko had said teaching others was also an effective way to learn. She also mentioned that Kyoko had jokingly said she would aim for first place. Tetsuo reminded her not to get another failing grade in the upcoming test. Hikari looked puzzled and asked if it was even possible to fail an aptitude test. Tetsuo explained that he would personally consider her score failing if she ended up with a very low mark. Hikari pouted and accused him of being unfair. Then, Tetsuo calmly shifted the topic, explaining that a vampire's desire to bite was actually a mix of craving blood and the instinct to bite itself. He said the first desire was satisfied thanks to the school's blood bag subsidy, while the second one was taken care of when she playfully nibbled Himari's arm. Finally, Tetsuo asked what kind of arm Hikari preferred to bite, which made her flustered. During lunch break, Yuki, Kyoko, and Tetsuo were hanging out in the biology room when Hikari came up with something unusual she called the Hikari Cup. Tetsuo had actually invited Yuki and Kyoko to join the school event. Yuki was curious about what Hikari was planning, and Tetsuo explained that since Hikari was the only vampire in the school, she wanted to figure out which arm would be the most appealing for her to bite. Tetsuo gave her the go-ahead to start, and Kyoko volunteered to go first. She rolled up her sleeve and Hikari gently touched Kyoko's arm. Hikari commented that Kyoko's arm felt fairly soft but also firm, probably because Kyoko often worked out and had to carry her own head around. Tetsuo asked if Hikari preferred softer arms, but Hikari said it really depended on the person. According to her, Kyoko lost a few points because she didn't have a neck, so even if Hikari bit her arm, it would feel strange to look at someone without one. After considering everything, Hikari gave Kyoko's arm a score of 65, saying it reminded her of a chicken tenderloin, something that sometimes made her hungry. Next was Yuki's turn. Hikari observed her arm for a moment before saying it looked and felt really nice, soft, cool, and slightly moist, just like Yuki herself. She gave Yuki's arm a score of 93 and nicknamed it Soft Ice Cream. Curious, Yuki asked how Hikari would rate her sister Himari's arm. Hikari explained that she had been nibbling on Himari's arm since they were little, so it was hard to judge objectively. To her, Himari's arm felt comforting, like something familiar that eased her loneliness. Tetsuo joked, asking if that meant it was like chewing gum, and Hikari laughed and agreed that was a pretty good comparison. Then it was Tetsuo's turn. After looking at his arm for a while, Hikari said it looked tough, probably had a strong scent, and that the hair on it might get stuck in her teeth if she ever tried to bite it. Yuki couldn't help laughing at that. When Tetsuo asked for his score, Hikari cheerfully gave him a red mark, saying his arm was basically inedible. That made Yuki the clear winner of the Hikari Cup. Later, Tetsuo remembered hearing a story about the Snow Woman, a spirit said to charm people with her beauty. Around that time, Kyoko was enjoying herself while Yuki helped lift her head. Tetsuo then asked if Hikari had ever wanted to bite Sakia's arm. Meanwhile, Sakia was quietly reading a manga she had borrowed from Yuki. She had picked it up out of nostalgia but ended up getting completely absorbed in it. Hikari, however, said she had never felt the urge to bite Sakia's arm. Tetsuo reflected that drinking blood for vampires seemed to be more than just feeding, maybe something instinctive or emotional. He recalled Hikari once mentioning that it was connected to strong personal urges, so he wondered if that meant she might be affected by a succubus like Sakia, who naturally emitted charm-based energy. He thought about the similarities between appetite, attraction, and curiosity, and without realizing it, he accidentally said aloud that Sakia seemed the most tempting. The three girls immediately frowned at him. Yuki scolded him, saying it wasn't polite to describe a girl that way. Tetsuo quickly tried to explain that he meant it from a vampire's perspective, not his own. Even so, they still looked disappointed and teased him for being inappropriate. Tetsuo nervously begged them not to misunderstand or gang up on him. A few days later, Hikari showed Tetsuo the results of her academic potential test. Tetsuo was surprised. There were no issues at all, and he congratulated her for doing great. Hikari was thrilled and realized that getting praised felt really nice. She left the biology room in high spirits, only to notice a crowd of students gathered around the announcement board. She didn't expect the academic test results to be posted publicly. When she checked, she was shocked to see Yuki ranked 27th. Her excitement quickly turned to frustration when she realized her own rank had dropped to 3rd. She couldn't believe someone had surpassed her sister Himari's score. Then Yuki and Kyoko came over to her. Still irritated, Hikari glared at Kyoko before turning to leave. But when she finally looked closer, she froze in surprise. Kyoko had ranked 1st. One night, Sakie was drinking beer at her home with a doll sitting across from her that she pretended was Tetsuo. In her imagination, Tetsuo gently scolded her for drinking too much, but she playfully tried to convince her imaginary version of him to join her. In her daydream, Tetsuo seemed like he was about to give her a punishment for her behavior, and the thought made her blush with embarrassment. A moment later, her phone rang. It was Oveki calling. When she answered, she jokingly said that she was studying about educational punishments. Curious, she asked why Oveki had called her so suddenly. Oveki said he'd been thinking about what happened the other day and admitted he had a hunch that the person Sakia liked was Tetsuo. Shocked, Sakia didn't expect Oveki to figure it out so easily. Oveki was convinced that Sakia had simply been staying quiet without taking any action. He told her that maybe it was time to make a move, and that this was her chance to show the world what it really meant to be a succubus. Oveki explained that he understood why Sakia had been holding herself back all this time. It was because she couldn't easily avoid the side effects of her succubus nature and didn't want them to affect her relationships. He respected that she had always chosen to restrain herself, but now that someone had captured her heart, he believed it was time for her to learn how to embrace that side of herself and use her charm to get closer to Tetsuo. He encouraged her to awaken the instincts that, according to old legends, succubi used to have. Sakia insisted that those kinds of stories only existed in myths, but deep down she began to wonder if Okeki might be right. Maybe she did need to change, if she ever wanted to truly connect with someone and understand what it meant to love. She realized she couldn't keep running away from her own nature forever. Oveki told her to try something new, to approach Tetsuo the next morning and see what happened. Nervously, Sakia asked if she really had to do that. Okeki worried that if she kept hesitating, Tetsuo might end up with someone else before she learned how to express her feelings naturally. He explained that if she only went halfway, she'd never make any progress. Whether or not Tetsuo reacted, she would still gain valuable experience. Okeki reminded her that what mattered most was getting close to Tetsuo sincerely before her abilities could affect him. With a teasing tone, he added that he was sure Sakia wanted to see how Tetsuo's face would look if he ever got flustered. The next morning, Sakia went to the biology room where Tetsuo was already there. He looked surprised to see her and quickly offered to make her a drink. Apologizing for showing up so suddenly, she handed him some snacks she'd brought along. Sakia explained that she wanted to talk about succubi because she thought the topic might help with his research. She told him she'd heard from Okeki that he was always eager to learn things that couldn't be found in textbooks, so she wanted to share what she knew directly. As expected, Tetsuo was fascinated. After all, it wasn't every day that he got to hear about succubi straight from one. Before coming, Okeki had also advised Sakia to pay attention to her timing during the conversation so she wouldn't waste the opportunity. Gathering her courage, Sakia asked Tetsuo if he wanted to see for himself how his succubus's charm worked. Tetsuo was startled and didn't quite understand what she meant. Nervously, Sakia removed her jacket, revealing a slightly more casual side of herself. She loosened her hair and looked away, clearly embarrassed but determined to be honest about who she was. To her surprise, Tetsuo told her she looked beautiful and that her atmosphere felt different today. Blushing, Sakia thanked him and wondered why he didn't seem overly affected by her charm. She started worrying that maybe her powers didn't work at all. In reality, Tetsuo was simply keeping his composure. Deep inside, he truly thought Sakia looked stunning, and he could sense her natural charm shining through. The sight reminded him of his own youth. Trying not to stare too much, he shifted his gaze to her hair, but even that shimmered under the light, making him even more nervous. Tetsuo realized then just how strong her allure must be, especially considering she hadn't done much to show it. It helped him understand why she always dressed modestly and kept her distance from others. Gently, he suggested that she didn't always need to be so cautious, and that wearing something a bit more relaxed might help her feel more comfortable. He believed that being overly guarded every day must have been exhausting for her. Blushing even more, Sakia asked him softly whether feelings of love toward a succubus could ever be genuine. She explained that most people assumed those feelings were just illusions caused by her charm, and that was one of the reasons she was so careful. More than anything, she didn't want a love that was false or forced. Tetsuo tried to explain his personal view about normal women and succubi. In his opinion, there wasn't really a difference between them other than the natural traits a succubus was born with. For him, Both Sakie and any other woman could drastically change how attractive they appeared just by changing their clothes. In short, the charm effect of a succubus was simply a matter of degree. He went on to explain his thoughts about perception and boundaries. Sakie's earlier opinion was that the difference between a normal woman and a succubus came from emotions that were amplified. But for Tatsuo, physical attraction depended on time, place, situation, and condition. If attraction was a mix of all those things, then the seductive aura a succubus had was just another part of Sakie's natural charm. That's why Tatsuo believed that genuine love wasn't something that could be faked. After that, Sakie shared her own perspective as a succubus. She felt happy being able to exchange thoughts, appreciate each other's views, and look for common ground. What made her truly happy wasn't the discussion about succubae, it was simply because she liked Tatsuo. She did feel a bit guilty toward Okeki for not using her charm the way he had suggested. Tatsuo responded to Sakie with sincerity, and he hoped she would do the same. Sakie admitted she still couldn't control her charm completely, so she chose not to use it. One day, she hoped she could find a balance. As she zipped her jacket back up, Tatsuo accidentally glanced at her chest. He instantly grew nervous, his face turning bright red. Sakie apologized, feeling equally embarrassed. That night, Sakie called Okeki to tell him what had happened earlier that day. She sounded happy, especially because she had seen Tatsuo's flustered expression. She had also told Okeki about the difference in opinions she and Tatsuo had about succubi. Okeki asked if their disagreement had caused any problems, but Sakie said it hadn't. She explained that Okeki wouldn't quite understand what she meant, but their debate had actually helped her and Tatsuo respect each other more. Even though the discussion had gotten a bit heated, they had reached some shared understandings. After the call ended, Okeki realized that must be how it feels to have a daughter growing up into adulthood. The next day, Sakie was seen talking to herself in her office. She wanted to have another discussion with Tatsuo, but deep down she knew it was just an excuse to see him again. She wished she could control her charm better. Yuki suddenly appeared and caught her off guard with a question, making Sakie a little flustered. Yuki seemed a bit suspicious of her, so Sakie tried to explain that her nature often caused trouble for others. She then asked why Yuki to come by. Yuki handed her a manga, and Sakie returned the one she had borrowed, thanking her warmly. The two had grown closer ever since they discovered they shared the same hobby. Later, Yuki met with Tatsuo and told him she wanted to learn how to control her powers. She joked that maybe she could be useful as a human air conditioner. Yuki still found it odd that she was afraid of heat, even though she could generate cold air. Tatsuo understood what she meant, and since summer was coming soon, he decided it was a good time to try practicing. He prepared a basin of water and asked Yuki to dip her feet in it. Just like the first time they met, they agreed that snow women could release cold air when feeling negative emotions. For example, when tense or stressed, their cold sweat appeared and tears of sadness could freeze into ice. When depressed, they would naturally emit cold air. Tetsuo suggested they should first practice producing cold air intentionally. He thought of collecting Yuki's cold sweat in the basin. To test her control, he told Yuki to pretend to feel sad so they could see if she could create cold air without actually being sad. He even demonstrated how to act sad himself. Unexpectedly, Yuki looked quite adorable while pretending to be sad, which made Tatsuo hold back his laughter. He thought maybe Yuki had just discovered a new kind of skill. Biologically speaking, it did make sense that a snow woman's bodily fluids were almost freezing just because her body temperature was low. When a snow woman felt negative emotions, something must have happened to her sweat as it left her body, causing it to freeze. The cold air she produced probably came from a drop in the surrounding temperature. Tetsuo started to wonder if negative emotions might create a kind of strong willpower. If willpower could be defined in a physical sense, that might also explain why a succubus charm could affect another person's will. He made a mental note to ask Sakie about that later. Meanwhile, Yuki hoped Tatsuo would finish soon because she was feeling really embarrassed by the situation. Afterward, Tatsuo mentioned he hadn't felt the air around her getting colder, but he noticed that Yuki was sweating. Yuki realized she was sweating because she was so nervous and shy. Since the experiment hadn't worked out, Yuki suggested they try something else instead. Not long after, Hikari came by and asked what they were doing. Tatsuo explained that they were trying to find a way for Yuki to use her ability to generate cold air during the summer. Yuki admitted that the method hadn't worked yet. Seeing the ice in the tub, Hikari invited Kyoko to join in and soak their feet together. Tetsuo then realized that the tub of ice water was actually the result of their efforts that day. When Hikari mentioned that the ice was starting to melt, Yuki quickly tried again to create more ice. The next day, during a hot afternoon PE class, Yusuke complained about why they had to exercise under such a scorching sun. Soon after, the girls gathered for a 1.5-kilometer run. Seeing them sweating made Yusuke unexpectedly fired up. The girls started running. Kyoko ran without carrying her head so it wouldn't get in the way. Hikari and Yuki were feeling overheated, surprised at how hot it already felt even though summer had just begun. After a while, Tatsuo walked by and Kyoko approached him. She told him that she was running together with Yuki and Hikari, but both of them were now cooling off under a tree. Later, the three of them went to the biology room. The cool air inside made them feel refreshed again. Tatsuo commented that PE outside must have been exhausting. Hikari expressed envy that Tatsuo got to stay inside an air-conditioned room all day. Tatsuo explained that there were several items in that room that couldn't be exposed to heat. He reminded them that they shouldn't visit the biology room too often, since there were rules about that. Hikari and Yuki agreed that summer was especially tough for vampires and snow women. Hikari said that vampires had it worse since they couldn't wear short sleeves without risking sunburn, but Yuki pointed out that snow women also had a hard time because their low body temperature made hot air feel unbearable, and they could barely sweat at all. The two of them ended up laughing at each other. Tetsuo then asked if the heat made Yuki's hands slippery. Yuki said that her hands didn't sweat much. Suddenly, Hikari asked Tetsuo to buy them a watermelon so they wouldn't feel so hot. Tetsuo scolded her lightly, saying that instead of asking for expensive fruit, they should just try to stay calm if they didn't want to overheat. He then went to the teacher's office to get some ice cream. Kyoko commented that Tetsuo probably just didn't want to spend money. The girls tried to think of another way to cool off and joked that maybe they could make Yuki angry so she'd release cold air, but Yuki refused since it was too tiring. Hikari wished she had an ability like Yuki's, something she could use anytime she wanted. Kyoko then suggested telling ghost stories to cool down. Hikari and Yuki agreed and asked Kyoko to start. Kyoko began telling a story about two girls who went exploring inside a cave where a murder had once taken place. The only light they had came from their phone screens, guiding them through the darkness. They went deeper and came across a fork in the path. There they found a note saying someone had killed a person and cut off their head. The head was to the left, and the body was to the right. Scared of seeing the head, they chose the right path. After walking for a while, they found the headless body and felt relieved, but then noticed another note near it. The note read, "The head is right behind you." Kyoko tried to scare Yuki and Hikari, but they ended up laughing since the story wasn't scary at all. Apparently, ghost stories didn't help them feel any cooler. Hikari then noticed Kyoko wearing a vest and asked why she wasn't sweating. Kyoko admitted that she was actually sweating a lot, but explained that if she didn't wear the vest, her undergarments might show through her shirt. She laughed it off and casually pointed it out, making Hikari and Yuki a little surprised by her confidence. A moment later, Tatsuo returned with ice cream. He didn't expect to find the three of them sitting there, looking completely chilled out. One day, Saki was hanging out with Hikari, Yuki, and Kyoko. Hikari shared that she had once kissed someone. Curious, Yuki asked who that person was. Hikari then said that she had kissed Tatsuo on the cheek, which surprised Saki quite a bit. Yuki admitted that her younger sister often kissed her on the cheek too. Kyoko confessed that she felt a little jealous of Hikari. Hikari explained that she kissed Tatsuo because he had been asking many questions about vampires, so she decided to tease him a little. It turned out that Saki also felt jealous after hearing that story. Later that afternoon, Kyoko was watching a drama on TV when her mother asked her to check the water in the bathtub. Kyoko quickly walked to the bathroom to turn off the faucet. Her mind, however, was still occupied with the thought of Hikari kissing Tatsuo just to tease him. Kyoko was sure that Tatsuo didn't take it seriously. Her face turned red when she saw a kissing scene on television, and she wondered if she could ever kiss Tatsuo too. The next day, the vice principal asked Tatsuo to carry some heavy items, and Tatsuo gladly agreed. Not long after, the principal praised Tatsuo, calling him hardworking and even saying that he took the initiative to offer counseling for Demi students. Many of the Demi students' parents liked Tatsuo as well. The vice principal, however, didn't seem too fond of him. While walking down the school hallway, Tatsuo felt a little annoyed that the vice principal always asked him to handle all the heavy tasks. Soon after, Kyoko approached him and offered to help, but Tatsuo quickly turned down her offer. Kyoko still followed him around, which made Tatsuo ask if she needed something. He was surprised when Kyoko suddenly lifted her head so high that it caught his attention. She kept walking beside him with her head raised, and Tatsuo wondered if there was a particular reason for that. As she leaned her head closer toward Tatsuo, he became startled and reminded her that he was carrying something heavy. He figured there must be a reason why Kyoko was acting that way. Suddenly, Kyoko's head slipped from her hands and began to fall. Seeing that, Tatsuo quickly tried to catch it, which made him drop the things he was carrying. Fortunately, Kyoko's body managed to grab her head before it hit the ground. Concerned, Tatsuo asked if she was okay. Kyoko told him that it had happened before, but she usually caught it easily, and she asked him not to worry. Tatsuo said he couldn't help but worry. One day, such carelessness could lead to a serious accident. He told her to be more careful. His firm tone made Kyoko's eyes well up with tears. She apologized for causing trouble, quickly gathered the books that had fallen and ran off while crying, unable to hold back her emotions. Tatsuo then realized she probably couldn't clean up properly while holding her head. Kyoko sat alone, crying quietly while covering her face. Before long, Hikari and Yuki found her and asked what had happened. Kyoko explained everything. Hikari hugged her head gently, saying that Kyoko probably just didn't like being scolded. Kyoko admitted that Tatsuo was a very kind person, and that was why she regretted making him upset. Hikari comforted her and tried to calm her down before handing Kyoko's head to Yuki, then ran off somewhere. Yuki stayed with Kyoko and reassured her. She said she understood how Kyoko felt and agreed that Tatsuo was indeed a good person. Yuki asked if Kyoko remembered the time they had ice cream together. Back then, Yuki was worried about her own snowgirl nature, and when she told Tatsuo about it, he encouraged her to express herself more openly. She hadn't understood why he pushed her to do that, but eventually realized that he only wanted to clear up her misunderstandings so she could become friends with Hikari and Kyoko. Yuki was very grateful for that. She said that being kind didn't always mean being gentle all the time. Tatsuo cared about Kyoko, and that's exactly why he scolded her. A little while later, Hikari returned with Tatsuo and brought him to meet Kyoko. She encouraged both of them to talk things out. Tatsuo immediately apologized to Kyoko, admitting that he shouldn't have acted that way. He said that disciplining students was part of his job as a teacher, but he had let his emotions take over, and that was wrong. He explained that he should have spoken calmly instead. He told Kyoko that he still wanted to stay on good terms with her. Kyoko cried and told him that he didn't need to apologize. At that moment, Hikari handed Kyoko's head to Tatsuo, who held it gently in his arms. As Kyoko continued to cry, she suddenly began laughing. Hikari had started tickling her body to cheer her up. Hikari playfully poked her sides, which made everyone laugh. Tatsuo reminded Hikari to behave, but Hikari jokingly told him not to get too emotional. Tatsuo replied that he scolded her because she often repeated the same mistakes. He then asked Kyoko what she really wanted to tell him. Kyoko thought that if she said she wanted to kiss Tatsuo like Hikari had done, Hikari would probably feel bad about it. Instead, they all ended up laughing together while Tatsuo stood there, not really understanding what was so funny. None of them realized that the vice principal had been quietly observing them the whole time. While soaking in the bathtub, Kyoko couldn't stop thinking about Tatsuo earlier that afternoon. Even though he had told her not to worry about it, she still felt that the whole thing had been her fault. Kyoko sent a message to Yuki and Hikari to thank them for helping her out so much, and she also admitted that she felt guilty toward Tatsuo. They suggested that she should give him a gift as an apology. Kyoko then asked what kind of gift Tatsuo might actually need. Hikari said there was probably only one thing Tatsuo truly wanted. The next day, Kyoko went to see Tatsuo and asked if he would like to know more about her body. Tatsuo said he was curious about how she managed to keep her vital functions working even though her head and body were separate. It was something that went beyond normal scientific understanding. Kyoko said that meeting someone like Tatsuo, who was an expert on Demis, was a great opportunity for her to learn more about herself. Tatsuo then suggested that they should also find out what other people thought about the subject. The following day, Tatsuo invited Kyoko to visit Musashino University. When they arrived, Kyoko was amazed at how different a university was from high school. The place was huge and she thought she might get lost. Tatsuo told her that might happen at first, but she would get used to it eventually. That day, they were going to visit one of Tatsuo's college friends. Even after graduating, his friend had continued his research at the university. Tatsuo explained that his friend was a good person, kind of strange, but definitely a genius. They soon arrived at Soma's lab. As soon as they met, Tatsuo and Soma greeted each other warmly. Soma already knew Kyoko's name and greeted her politely. He was a physicist. Kyoko thanked him for taking the time to meet her. Soma said he was excited to meet a real Dullahan in person, calling it something like a romantic ideal from folklore. Soma began to explain his idea using an analogy. He said to imagine Kyoko eating a steamed bun. When she swallowed it, the food moved from her head to her body, meaning that an object had somehow traveled through space. He suggested that between Kyoko's head and body there must be a kind of high-dimensional tunnel, what physicists might call a wormhole. Tatsuo said he had heard of that before. It was like the route used by spaceships when they warp in science fiction stories. Soma added that it was also sometimes referred to as hyperspace. Tatsuo then asked what a wormhole actually was. Soma explained that a high-dimensional space was completely separate from the usual space-time framework. He wasn't entirely sure, but the wormhole connecting Kyoko's head and body seemed to be an independent tunnel. Still, her nerves and blood vessels were perfectly connected, somehow taking over the role of a normal neck. Tatsuo agreed, saying that the wormhole must act as the connection between her head and body, so in a way that wormhole was Kyoko's neck. Soma asked what made Tatsuo so sure that Kyoko's neck actually existed. Tatsuo said that since Kyoko could talk, she must have vocal cords somewhere, and that implied she did have a neck, even if it couldn't be seen. Kyoko said that she once had an endoscopy, and it showed that she really did have a neck. Soma asked if the results looked the same as a human's. Tatsuo wondered if the wormhole connecting them was extremely small. Soma replied that Kyoko's wormhole was incredibly sophisticated. Soma went on to explain that, in essence, Kyoko wasn't much different from an ordinary human. The only difference was that her neck existed in a separate dimension, forming the wormhole that connected her head and body. Theoretically, that high-dimensional space could even allow for time travel. Soma said he would love to see how it worked in person one day. He then asked Kyoko about the joints on her neck. Kyoko said that both sides were covered with skin. Tatsuo found that strange. What entered her mouth would go into her body, and from the outside, the path looked completely sealed. Kyoko suggested that maybe something was deliberately hiding it. Soma thought that might be possible, as if something prevented people from observing it directly. When food entered her mouth, the process worked exactly like a human's, even though the outer connection seemed invisible. Soma was still curious about the purpose of that and why it couldn't be seen. Suddenly, he fell silent. Kyoko was about to call out to him, but Tatsuo told her not to. Soma was deep in thought. When he got like that, it was as if time itself stopped around him. Kyoko commented that Soma was amazing. After a moment, Soma moved closer to Kyoko, which startled her a little. He said that every phenomenon must have a reason, and in physics, simple observation wasn't enough to explain cause and effect. Basically, whether humans could see something or not, or even whether humans existed at all, the phenomenon itself would still occur. However, he added certain conditions could still change depending on human observation. Tatsuo was completely lost at that point and couldn't quite follow what Soma meant. Soma explained that an electron can be observed, and there's something called a quantum. Before being observed, a quantum expands like space in a wave pattern, but once it's observed, it immediately collapses into a particle. He believed that the act of observation itself holds meaning. Human observation can change the outcome of a phenomenon, and that makes people feel like they have a purpose in the universe. Observation, according to him, represents the will behind human action, meaning that human will can influence phenomena. Kyoko said it sounded like a kind of supernatural ability. Tatsuo, thinking logically about Soma's idea, suggested that the ability of a snow girl to freeze things with negative energy could also be considered a form of psychic power. Soma wanted to take a closer look at the mist surrounding Kyoko, but Tatsuo stalked him because it embarrassed her. He also warned Soma not to touch her since it caused her pain. Soma thought that something existing beyond the known laws of space and time might appear around her, though it seemed to be covered by skin. He assumed that perhaps Kyoko herself was unconsciously concealing it, and that when someone tries to observe something's existence, the very intention of observing it can cause it to change. Soma was also convinced that the fire-like aura on Kyoko's body wasn't actually fire, but rather a fluctuation of space itself. It was the only visible element connected to a separate dimension, and whenever someone tried to touch it, it reacted defensively. He mentioned that the appearance of the flame seemed to shift depending on her emotions, which served as further proof that human observation could influence a phenomenon. In conclusion, Soma believed that Dullahan's were capable of material transfer that transcended space and time, hinting at the influence of physical willpower or human consciousness, meaning that Dullahan's represented a new frontier in physics. Tatsuo was fascinated by Soma's explanation, and Kyoko agreed with his perspective. Later, while walking off campus, Kyoko asked how Tatsuo and Soma knew each other. It turned out that Soma used to sit beside Tatsuo back in college. According to Tatsuo, Soma hadn't changed much. He was still the same person who wanted to remove fiction from science fiction. Soma laughed, saying that Tatsuo had changed a lot, especially since he looked more muscular now. Kyoko walked ahead, enjoying the scenery. Tatsuo thanked Soma for the interesting conversation and asked if he wanted to continue observing Kyoko's condition. Soma replied that Tatsuo probably understood more about researching Ajin. Tatsuo said that while such studies were restricted by ethics, it was fine as long as the subject gave permission. Kyoko began to reflect. She realized that she shouldn't be satisfied with just studying or answering quiz questions. There was more to life than that. She wanted to do something that could change the world, like researching Dullahan's. If studying Dullahan's became too difficult because of ethical concerns, she could still become a researcher and study herself. Soma smiled, seeing Kyoko's determined gaze toward the future. He handed Tatsuo a university pamphlet, asking him to give it to her. Tatsuo was sure Soma was excited about studying Dullahan's, and he wondered aloud if understanding their secrets might one day allow Kyoko to become a normal human. As that thought crossed his mind, he imagined what Kyoko would look like as a regular person, taller than Hikari and Yuki, standing confidently among them. He then realized how complicated such ideas could be and reminded himself why ethics were important. At that moment, Kyoko approached him and smiled warmly. That day was a scorching summer day. Yuki, Kyoko, and Hikari went to the biology room to escape the heat. They complained about how unbearably hot it was, and even Tatsuo mentioned that this year's summer would probably be a really hot one. Yuki apologized, saying they had only come there to cool off. Tatsuo understood, knowing that it was natural for demi-humans to struggle with high temperatures. Kyoko admitted that the summer heat really was intense that year. Tatsuo then suggested they think of ways for the demi-students, especially Hikari and Yuki, to stay comfortable during the season. Yuki agreed, explaining that every year she always struggled to figure out how to handle the summer heat. Kyoko realized that summer must be really tough for both Yuki and Hikari. Hikari suggested they start figuring things out right then, but Tatsuo said it was already late in the afternoon and he hadn't thought of anything yet. He promised to take them somewhere on Saturday instead. Everyone agreed and grew excited for the weekend. Tatsuo's task was clear: to come up with a way for a vampire and a snow girl to enjoy summer comfortably. The next day, while Tatsuo was walking through the hallway, Yusuke asked if he could be the goalkeeper for their soccer game. Tatsuo turned down the offer. Curious, Yusuke asked if Tatsuo was busy that day. Tatsuo explained that he couldn't be disturbed because he was working on a plan to help Yuki and Hikari get through summer more comfortably. Oikawa then jokingly asked if Tatsuo had become a private teacher for the demi-students. Tatsuo was surprised by the comment and asked what made them think that. Yusuke pointed out that Tatsuo was the one the demi-students always turned to when they needed someone to talk about their unique bodies and experiences. Suddenly, the vice principal appeared and agreed with Yusuke's observation. He said that while counseling Ajin students was a good thing, becoming too involved could lead to problems. The vice principal reminded Tatsuo that he also needed to pay attention to students who weren't Ajin. Yusuke quickly added that Tatsuo treated non-demi students just as well, but the vice principal questioned why the demi students relied only on Tatsuo. He said Tatsuo might be getting a bit too involved and that if Tatsuo could learn to hold back a little, the demi-students might naturally become less dependent on him. He suggested that it would be better if the demi-students learned to solve their own problems with help from others as well. Tatsuo thought about it and realized that the vice principal had a point. Later, during a break on the field, Yusuke and his friends talked about what the vice principal had said. Yusuke wondered if the demi-students would actually ask someone else for help if Tatsuo stopped assisting them. He imagined Yuki calling out his name and even wondered if she would ever ask him for help. Suddenly, a ball came flying and hit Yusuke. It turned out that the ball had been kicked by Shizuka, who came over with Atsumi. She apologized, saying she only meant to pass it. The four of them ended up chatting about the demi-students. Shizuka mentioned that none of the demi-girls had ever come to her for help. Yusuke was sure that Shizuka must be their last resort. Oikawa was curious about what kind of counseling demi-students actually needed, since he thought they weren't that different from ordinary humans. Yusuke explained that Yuki and Hikari struggled with heat, and Tatsuo had mentioned wanting them to spend summer comfortably. Shizuka seemed puzzled about why Yuki and Hikari would depend on Tatsuo for something that simple. Yusuke pointed out that Hikari often drank tomato juice, so Atsumi could easily ask her which brand tasted best. But Shizuka replied that they could just look it up online. Atsumi then asked whether they should treat the demi-students the same as ordinary people. Yusuke argued that calling them different might count as discrimination. But Atsumi disagreed, saying that ignoring their differences and pretending they were exactly the same could also be a kind of discrimination. She explained that Tatsuo understood and respected the differences the demi-students had, which was why they trusted him so much. She then asked whether the demi-students would feel comfortable asking for help from people who refused to acknowledge their unique circumstances and just treated them as ordinary humans. Atsumi said they might feel hesitant or nervous, and maybe they simply felt more relaxed talking about Ajin matters with Tatsuo, someone who actually understood. The group realized that the demi-students relied on Tatsuo not because he was overprotective, but because he genuinely understood them. Yusuke was impressed by how deeply Atsumi thought about it. He said they should talk to Tatsuo about it sometime, while Shizuka wondered whether doing that might actually cause more trouble than it helped. Tatsuo was still lost in thought about what the vice principal had said when Hikari and the others came up to him. Yuki asked about their plans for the summer, and Kyoko seemed curious too. Tatsuo looked uneasy, almost guilty, before deciding to head to the biology room, saying he was busy. Meanwhile, Hikari and the others gathered in their usual spot. Hikari wondered why Tatsuo suddenly had something to take care of. Yuki guessed that maybe Tatsuo had been thinking a lot about ways to help them with their problems, and maybe they had started to rely on him too much. She felt a little guilty, realizing they might have been taking advantage of his kindness. Kyoko then asked if they had become a burden to Tatsuo. Hikari didn't believe that was the case. She remembered that Tatsuo once told her learning about the demigirls was something he truly enjoyed, so she told them not to worry too much about it. Still, Kyoko couldn't help but wonder why Tatsuo was acting the way he did earlier. Yuki thought maybe Tatsuo was dealing with something involving another teacher, and that it might be better for them not to get involved. Hikari decided she would try talking to Sakie about it, but Yuki doubted that would help. When Hikari reached the teacher's office, she looked around for Sakie. The vice principal noticed her and asked what she was doing there. Hikari said she was looking for Sakie, and the vice principal told her that Sakie was probably working outside in the courtyard. Hikari thanked him and hurried off. At the same time, Yusuke and his friends were still chatting about how to make friends with the Demi. Shizuka said that everyone had their own differences and that it wasn't a bad thing to talk openly about them. Yusuke admitted he hadn't realized that Shizuka, who often seemed a bit blunt, was actually pretty insightful. Not long after, Hikari arrived and asked if anyone knew where Sakie was. Hatsumi told her that Sakie was trimming trees near the running track. Before Hikari left, Yusuke mentioned what had been going on with Tatsuo. Once Hikari understood the situation, she promised to try helping him out. She thanked Yusuke before running off, leaving him thrilled because Hikari had given him a nickname. Later, Hikari explained everything about Tetsuo's situation to Sakia, Yuki, and Kyoko. Yuki began to feel even guiltier, convinced that the three of them had been taking advantage of Tatsuo's kindness. Sakia disagreed. She said she actually felt lucky that Tatsuo was around, since he had helped the Demi students so many times. Kyoko thought the vice principal shouldn't have said those things to Tatsuo, but Sakia replied that even though the vice principal could be strict, his passion for teaching was admirable, and that he wasn't necessarily wrong in what he said. Kyoko admitted she wasn't sure what they should do, while Yuki confessed she didn't know if she could just start talking openly to other people. Kyoko, on the other hand, was naturally easy to talk to. Hikari suggested they should find a way to cheer Tatsuo up together. That evening, Tatsuo went to the beach, still replaying the vice principal's words in his mind. At first, Tatsuo's interest in Demis had come from a personal fascination, something he was embarrassed to admit. But as time went on, he realized that each of the demigirls had their own struggles, and what he truly wanted was to help them. Still, he began to question if his help was really needed. Maybe they were capable of solving their problems on their own. If they could do that, they would grow stronger. And if their families, classmates, and others around them supported them too, that would be even better. Tatsuo wondered if he had been getting too involved. Unlike Soma, who studied Demis from a research perspective, which could benefit them, and maybe even lead to discoveries that change the world, Tatsuo thought that maybe he should step back and act more like a researcher too. Just then his phone buzzed. Hikari had sent him a video. In the video, Yuki appeared a little nervous. She thanked Tatsuo for everything he had done. She said she thought maybe he was worried that he had spoiled them too much. Yuki recalled the time she asked him for advice about her natural traits, something she might have been able to figure out on her own. But even if she could, she said that didn't mean she should have to face it alone. Thanks to Tatsuo, she no longer felt anxious about who she was. Because of that, she was able to enjoy simple things like eating ice cream with everyone else. It meant she could laugh and have fun with her friends again. Yuki's voice wavered for a moment, and then it was Kyoko's turn to speak. Kyoko asked how Tatsuo had been doing. She felt like it had been a long time since they last met, even though they had just seen each other earlier that afternoon. It was probably because Tatsuo had done so much for her lately, and she wanted to thank him for that. Kyoko talked about how, ever since the first time she met Tatsuo, he had always been willing to listen to her stories. That made her realize how enjoyable it was to talk to others about being a Dullahan. She said that Tatsuo wasn't just kind. He also didn't hesitate to scold her when she behaved poorly. She understood that he did so out of his responsibility as a teacher. Until then, no teacher had ever approached Kyoko directly as a Dullahan. She believed that Tatsuo would be the same kind of teacher to any student, whether they were a Demi or not. Even if he didn't have a special interest in Demis, she was sure he would treat everyone with the same fairness and care he had shown her. Kyoko hoped that Tatsuo would continue to be a great teacher for all of his students. She wished that he would keep giving advice when they faced problems and correct them whenever they made mistakes. She even mentioned that she planned to visit him again in the biology room. Yuki, without realizing it, clapped her hands because Kyoko's words sounded so heartfelt and inspiring. Then it was Sakia's turn. Sakia hadn't expected to give a speech too, but she admitted that she relied on Tatsuo a lot, both as a teacher and as a succubus. She said she deeply respected him for his sincerity and constant willingness to help. Sakia hoped she could continue to count on Tatsuo's guidance and encouragement. She also mentioned that she'd be happy to listen to Tatsuo's stories if he ever needed someone to talk to. With a warm smile, she even suggested that maybe someday they could go out for a drink together to unwind. Hikari finished recording the video, and everyone was surprised that she hadn't said anything herself. When Tatsuo later watched the video, he was touched by it. Just then, Hikari appeared, calling out to him. She explained that she only wanted to make sure the video had actually reached him since the file size had been so large. Seeing Tatsuo from a distance, Hikari walked over and sat beside him, asking if he had already watched the video. Tatsuo thanked her sincerely. Hikari said that Yusuke had told her about what had happened, so she guessed that Tatsuo must have been feeling down. Tatsuo admitted that he had been, but the video made him feel happy and at peace. Still, he couldn't help wondering if maybe he had been overdoing things lately, and that perhaps he should learn to balance himself with others. Hikari disagreed. She told him that trying too hard was never a bad thing, that it was strange to think of effort as something excessive. In her opinion, when someone works hard, they deserve support, not judgment. And if others wanted to keep up with someone who tried their best, then they should simply try even harder themselves. Suddenly, Hikari raised her voice and thanked Tatsuo for always giving his all for her and everyone else. She said she didn't want to fall behind him. She wanted to work just as hard. Hikari promised that she would do her best to repay all the kindness that Tetsuo and the others had shown her. She called the video a secret surprise message for Tetsuo. Noticing that Tetsuo still looked a little down, Hikari gently reached out and patted his head, trying to comfort him. The next day, Tetsuo went to talk to the vice principal, though it turned out that the vice principal also wanted to speak with him. The vice principal told Tetsuo to forget about the requests he'd made the previous day and apologized for lecturing him. He asked Tetsuo to keep doing what he had been doing all along. Tetsuo was caught off guard when he saw the Demi students hanging out with Yusuke and the others. They'd all looked so cheerful and comfortable together. The vice principal remarked that as long as there were students who felt inspired by Tetsuo's actions, ignoring his efforts would be a mistake. Tetsuo smiled. His new life surrounded by the Demis was full of both challenges and joy. There was so much he had learned, from how Demis lived their daily lives, what they thought about, how they communicated, and how they changed, and he wanted to keep learning even more. One night, Tetsuo dreamed of running through a forest and being bitten by a vampire. He woke up in a panic because of that nightmare. When he opened his eyes, he saw Hikari walking toward him. She showed him a photo of herself with Himari. In the picture, Hikari's eyes were glowing, and she wondered if that was the reason vampires could see in the dark. Tetsuo explained that it was similar to nocturnal animals. Those creatures have a mirror-like layer behind their eyes that reflects light passing through the retina, allowing them to see clearly even in the faintest light. The glow in her eyes comes from the light reflected back from human illumination. Tetsuo thought vampires might be able to see in the dark for the same reason. Hikari felt glad she had asked him about it. Tetsuo added that this sensitivity might also make vampires uncomfortable with bright light. Hikari realized that must be why they weren't allowed to take photos with flash at the zoo. Tetsuo reminded her to be careful so her eyes wouldn't get hurt, explaining that vampires might also struggle with sunlight. Since it was a hot, sunny day, he suggested she protect herself from the heat and avoid dizziness or sunburn. Hikari smiled and said she already knew since she had been a vampire for years. Tetsuo then mentioned his dream about being attacked by a vampire. It made him wonder if a vampire's instinct to strike in darkness came naturally. In his view, the most comfortable way for vampires to live might be similar to nocturnal animals, by adapting to their strengths while minimizing their weaknesses. He felt that living like a human could sometimes make a vampire feel restricted. After realizing he had gone on too long, Tetsuo apologized for lecturing her about unimportant things. Hikari appreciated how much he cared about her, but said there was one thing he misunderstood. She took Tetsuo's jacket, wrapped it around herself like a cape, and said that modern vampires like her could easily find prey. She then grabbed a box from Tetsuo's desk and jumped with excitement. Tetsuo quickly reminded her to be careful with her movements. Embarrassed, Hikari blushed and told him to act more like a vampire himself. Tetsuo played along with her little game. Hikari then asked if she could borrow the school's swimming pool. Tetsuo agreed as long as she was supervised by a teacher. He promised to ask the principal for permission. Hikari was thrilled and couldn't wait to go swimming on Saturday. After school, Himari approached Tetsuo and mentioned that Hikari had messaged her about what had happened earlier. She wanted him to explain the situation. Once Tetsuo told her everything, Himari apologized for misunderstanding. Tetsuo mentioned that Hikari wanted to use the school pool, and he wondered if outdoor swimming would be uncomfortable for a vampire. Surprisingly, Himari didn't seem to mind. Tetsuo was surprised that she allowed it, but Himari said that if that's what Hikari wanted, she would support her. She explained that Hikari was used to spending time outside during the summer, so she didn't see a problem with it. That night, Sakia called Okeki. She couldn't stop thinking about what she had said in that video before, wondering if Tetsuo might want to go out for drinks sometime. But then she started worrying. What would she drink? Beer, wine, or something else? And what if something awkward happened while drinking? Okeki, already sleepy, told her they could talk about it tomorrow. After he hung up, Sakia realized overthinking wouldn't help anything. Determined, she decided to bring it up with Tetsuo the next day. At school, Sakia approached Tetsuo cheerfully. She wanted to talk about the idea of going out for drinks, but before she could even mention it, Tetsuo invited her to help supervise Hikari and the others on Saturday instead. When Saturday came, Hikari, Yuki, and Kyoko went swimming together in the school pool. They were full of energy, laughing and splashing around. Hikari even asked Tatsuo if her swimsuit looked cute. He agreed it did. Tatsuo then asked Kyoko if her head felt hot in the sunlight, but she said she was fine. He reminded them not to hesitate if they needed help with anything. Sakia joined him and thanked him for taking the time to watch over the Demi students. Tatsuo handed her a key, explaining that he had to step away to the biology room for a bit. He thought it would be a nice opportunity for the girls to enjoy their time together. He also mentioned that Shizuka and Itsumi would be joining them soon. Just as he was about to leave, Sakia asked him to stay a little longer. Meanwhile, Hikari and the others started playing with a ball in the pool, their laughter echoing across the water. Tatsuo told Sakia that Hikari had personally asked him to borrow the pool. Sakia seemed concerned about the bright sunlight, wondering if Hikari would be alright, but Tatsuo was confident she would handle it fine. When Sakia asked why he didn't join in the fun, Tatsuo said he'd rather let her have a good time with them instead. Then he realized that Sakia probably had never done anything like swimming in a swimsuit before. She admitted it was true, saying that places like pools or beaches were always crowded, which made her feel a little self-conscious. Meanwhile, Yusuke was sitting high up in a tree using binoculars to watch Hikari and the others. Oikawa told him to get down right away, but Yusuke seemed to really enjoy the view of the girls swimming. He even invited Oikawa to climb up and join him. At that time, Tatsuo apologized to Sakia because it looked like he had left too much work to her. But instead of being upset, Sakia thanked him for always looking out for her. She really wanted to express her feelings to him, but she was too nervous. For a moment, she even thought about relying on her succubus ability to make him notice her. When Tatsuo was about to leave, Sakia stopped him. She mentioned that it seemed like he wasn't affected by her charm at all, then nervously showed him the swimsuit she was wearing. Unexpectedly, Yusuke, who was still up in the tree, lost his balance and fell because of Sakia's charm affecting him from a distance. Tetsuo tried to stay calm, saying that Sakia's swimsuit looked really cute. He covered his face, clearly flustered, silently admitting that Sakia looked beautiful. Sakia, blushing, invited Tetsuo to swim together, but he admitted that he wasn't good at swimming. Suddenly, Yuki overheard Sakia joking that maybe Tatsuo couldn't swim because his name literally meant Iron Man. Tatsuo didn't catch the joke and just stayed quiet, while Yuki tried so hard not to laugh that she ended up getting water up her nose. Later, Sakia asked what Tatsuo would do if a student ever confessed their love to him. Tatsuo said it would probably take a pretty bold student to do something like that, and he would definitely turn them down because he saw high school students as kids, especially since they were his students. Hearing that, Sakia felt relieved. She told him she wasn't a student or a kid, but her hint seemed to go completely over Tatsuo's head. Nearby, Itsumi and Shizuka took a break after playing with Hikari and the others. They wondered how Hikari and the rest still had so much energy. Before long, Tatsuo walked over to Kyoko. She asked why he wasn't swimming with everyone else. At that time, Sakia was also joining in the fun with Hikari and the others. Tatsuo said he couldn't really join them. Just then, Yuki picked up a ball that had landed near Kyoko's head. She complimented Kyoko, saying it was impressive how she could keep talking while still playing with the group. Tatsuo commented that it looked like watching a craftsman at work. Kyoko laughed and said that moving her body from a distance felt like controlling a video game character, as if it wasn't even her own body. Tatsuo replied that if there were a video game tournament, Kyoko would definitely win first place. Kyoko joked that since there were only 3 Dullahans in the world, even if she came in last, she'd still place third. Kyoko then mentioned that Dullahan legends were a bit different from other demi-legends. Dullahans were often described as headless knights riding horses. Tatsuo pointed out that not many demi-legends were tied to a specific class or profession like that. Kyoko wondered if maybe, long ago, there was a great Dullahan who became a legendary knight, someone whose story was remembered throughout history. Tetsuo agreed that if such a Dullahan ever existed, it would make sense for them to become the inspiration for the legend. Kyoko added that, like many myths, Dullahans were often associated with death, said to be the last thing someone saw before they died. There were also old stories about Dullahans pouring a basin of blood in front of a door, which might actually represent someone being killed by one. Another tale claimed that anyone who looked at a Dullahan would lose their sight. Tatsuo found it interesting how all those myths seemed connected in that way. Just then, Hikari called out, wondering why Kyoko hadn't caught the ball she had tossed to her. It turned out Kyoko was too absorbed in her conversation with Tatsuo. Tatsuo then asked why Dullahans couldn't cross rivers. Kyoko replied that it might be similar to how she stayed by the edge of the pool. Tatsuo realized that if Kyoko's head ever went underwater, it could be dangerous. In a pool, it might not be too bad, but in a fast-moving river, it could be fatal for a Dullahan. He figured that's probably why Dullahans in the old stories never tried to chase people across rivers. Kyoko said she actually liked that part of the legend and made it sound mysterious. Suddenly, Hikari swam up to Kyoko, saying she had gotten so caught up in talking that her body had completely stopped moving. Hikari asked if Kyoko's head had ever been underwater before, saying the view down there was beautiful. Tatsuo immediately called Kyoko's father to ask for permission first, which surprised Kyoko since she only wanted to try it for a few seconds. Sakia mentioned that asking permission was important, even when one already knew the answer. Hikari then noticed that Sakia was only keeping her head above water and asked why. Sakia admitted that she still felt shy about being seen in her swimsuit. Tatsuo then got ready to dive in and gently held Kyoko's head to help her. Seeing Tatsuo up close like that made Kyoko's face turn bright red, and Sakia, flustered as well, nearly let out a squeal. As soon as Kyoko entered the water, she slowly opened her eyes and was amazed by the beautiful view beneath the surface. Tatsuo and the others were happy to see how much Kyoko was enjoying the underwater scenery. After a short while, Kyoko lifted her head back above the surface, saying that the view under the water was truly beautiful. Then Yuki went over to Itsumi and Shizuka to invite them to join in. Itsumi refused, but Yuki and Shizuka playfully insisted and teamed up to gently pull Itsumi into the pool. That day, Hikari and the others had a great time swimming together and enjoying the day at the pool. After swimming, Hikari waited for Tatsuo so they could go home together. Tatsuo was a bit worried that Hikari's skin might have gotten sunburned, but she didn't seem to mind, saying she only needed a day to rest and recover. She thanked Tatsuo for making her wish come true. Tatsuo mentioned that if Himari hadn't allowed it, he wouldn't have given permission either. Hikari explained that she had chosen an indoor pool on purpose, since going too far away would have caused trouble for everyone. After that, she said goodbye and went home. On Monday morning, Tatsuo was standing in front of the school gate. Not long after, Hikari arrived, looking cheerful as always, and greeted him with a bright smile. She said that the gate was the very first place where they had met back when the cherry blossoms were in full bloom. Hikari talked about something Tetsuo once said, that vampires were restricted in modern society. But according to her, having people who cry with you when you're sad and laugh with you when you're happy isn't a restriction at all. Spending time with those people, she said, is something far more precious and joyful. So in her eyes, the life of a vampire in this era is actually a happy one. After saying that, Hikari hurried off to class. However, before she could go, Tatsuo asked her to write her name on the list of students who were late. Hikari tried to keep talking, but Tatsuo insisted she write it down first. Hikari explained that she had been late because Himari didn't help her tie her hair that morning, so she had to do it herself, which took longer than usual. Tatsuo wasn't swayed by her excuse and still asked her to sign her name. Reluctantly, Hikari wrote it down. Tetsuo realized that at first he was simply curious about the demigirls, but over time he found himself wanting to support them, and often he ended up learning from them instead. There were still many things he hadn't talked about with them yet. Meanwhile, Hikari wondered aloud why no one seemed willing to help her. Tatsuo told her that it was already the third time she had been late, and as a result, she would have to help clean up after school.